hide the iPad that I use as a monitor. I'm charging it. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Monday, everyone. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to dye some yarn inspired by this beautiful photo here. And I picked this photo for the March 2020 ChemKnits Dye Along. Every month I try to pick a new photo to inspire color on yarn or fiber, and I invite all of you to dye along with me. And then in about a month I will share a recap video featuring the yarn that I dye in this stream, plus the yarn that you dye at home over the next few weeks. And so if you would like me to feature your yarn that you created inspired by this same photo in the recap, you can share the pictures with me on Instagram using the hashtag ChemKnitsDyeAlong. It's the one up there. Or you can reply to this inspiration photo on the ChemKnits Facebook page with a photo comment. And I will link in the description of this video to the Facebook post if you have trouble finding it. But on Facebook, I'm just ChemKnits. So that should be easy to find. And I really enjoy the whole process behind this series because when two different people look at the same picture, they may create the exact same kind of colorway, or they may create things that are completely different. And so it's fun to see the variation and the different techniques and things that people use. And whenever I pick like a flower or a bird or something and there's stuff in the background, there tends to be debate. So are you going to focus on the petals and that gorgeous gradient that we have there? Are you going to bring in elements from the greenery or even that purple from the backdrop? That's all up to you. I mean, really, you could focus just on that backdrop as well and have hints of the orange and pink from the flowers. And so I think that's why this is all so fun. It's because it really does allow you to pick what elements that you want to do. And it's fun to just see how all the yarn turns out. And I love just doing the recaps and seeing what you guys all submit. And I need to go this way because of where I put the photo. Aha. I moved a thing so my mouse is on the floor today. Good morning. It's going to still be winter for another couple months in Montana. Yeah, well, we've had some very spring weather here in Massachusetts. I mean, today is technically the first day of spring, and hopefully it'll stick. Because we've had, like, we sent the kids in lighter jackets to school today. So fingers crossed that that remains. Like, I wore a dress the other day, but yeah, I mean, it might still get cold. But yeah, I don't know if it's global warming or what, because we've had some very, very warm weather for March. Normally March is still pretty winter in Boston as well. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys can join today. And so yeah, please make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and give the video a thumbs up if you want to see more content. That's all very, very helpful. But all right, so what have I planned for today? I planned, we'll see like how far we go, but I thought that we would start today with some dip dyeing. I have to scooch over here. Yesterday, fine, yesterday or today. I always get confused. Today's my parents' anniversary, so then I grew up thinking that was the first day of spring, and then I realized it was the day before, so yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, so I thought that we would start with some dip dyeing to create sort of like a yellow to pink kind of gradient. Not necessarily using the entire skein for each of the dips. Trying to preserve a tiny bit of yellow and only having like a tiny bit of orange. So I think that we would like dip part of the skein into some yellow, probably not absorbing all the yellow we have. Do that on a few bases. And I have a steamer basket like behind where that pot is, so that way I can steam to get that yellow to set if we've really just soaked it in. And then we will use a pink. I've got deep magenta, which I will definitely want to use at a bit of a lower depth of shade. And if it's a bit too pink, we can add a little bit more yellow to it and adjust as we go along. I did consider sparkles, but I feel like I didn't end up pre-soaking any sparkle yarn, but a sparkle yarn definitely would be a choice for this. And if I have to grab more yarn, not for a yarn mop, but there is another colorway that I have in my head that I then might grab some sparkle yarn for, depending on where we are over the course of the stream. But yeah, part of me was like, ooh, sparkle or silk. But then like, yeah, when I was grabbing yarn this morning, I was like, okay. But I did grab one yarn base, and I'm gonna make this smaller so that way I don't have to sit in an awkward, sit awkwardly off to the side. Okay, so I thought that we would do dip dyeing for the base of the petals and then conceivably add some green or maybe deep purple speckles on top of it. I thought that we'll see how I feel with the colorway, if I love it the way it is or what. We're gonna have a few different versions so that way I have things to play around with. But I also have prepared, which maybe it's a little bit of a cheat when it comes to speckles, but I've prepared a couple skeins of the wool to dye for Donegal DK multicolored nets yarn. And so this yarn is 85% superwash merino, 15% colorful neps, and the neps are blue, green, pink, and yellow. And so I thought that this could be a fun way to bring in part of the background elements into today's stream. And so we have some of this to play with to give a little quicker gratification for all those colors. So I have that, and then I also have some Knit Pick Stroll, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and then some Swish DK, which is 100% superwash merino. So those are the three bases we're starting with. And then I do have, again, sparkle yarn, which we may pull in, seeing what we like. I've got a bunch of dry powders down here, because I think if I was going to do not starting from dye stocks that I have, if I was going to go from dry powders, maybe I would do brilliant yellow, tangelo, and some pink orchid, and sort of blend the tangelo and pink orchid a bit. And so I've got all those colors down here already. I don't think I brought down, like, I've got emerald green, but that's not the best for speckles. It spreads a fair amount, and I think that that's too emeraldy. And I'm super into moss, even though that can be super yellow, but I don't know if I brought that down. But certainly I could go upstairs and find it, is another color. So, you know, I don't know if we'll go all the way to speckles or what, but we have all of those options pulled for today. Welcome, Melanie. Welcome to the live stream and live chat. Oh, you might get snow into May. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. But yeah, so I am always curious to see where you all end up with these colors. But let's go over to the stove and prepare the dye bath. Oh, wait. I almost forgot. What's today? Monday. So on Saturday, I launched pre-orders for the 2022 Spring Mini Skein mini series. And so the listings are in my Etsy shop, ChemKnits Creations. There have been some items that have sold out, but I will do a restock at some point once more yarn arrives. I never list anything for pre-order when I don't have the yarn required to finish the colorways on hand, because, you know, things can happen with the mail or supplies, and I wouldn't want to sell something when I won't be able to deliver. And so I ordered more of the sock blanks that I needed, so that isn't even showing up here because that has sold out completely. And with the add-on, and you have to get the sets to get the add-on, I've ordered more of the two, is it not? It's not showing that. I'm trying to like toggle the thing, but I'm not seeing that on camera. There's only a non-superwash base left for the add-on, but there's a DK weight and a fingering weight superwash base, and I'm getting more of both of those. Also, I guess I can do this full on the fingering weight and the superwash DK. And then as for the sets themselves, which again, when I try to toggle, it's not showing. There are the Yak blend is currently sold out, as is the Silk Merino, the Superwash Silk Merino blend, and the Superwash Merino Nylon DK weight blend are all sold out. But I also have more yarn coming because I always hold some sets back, but for something like this with so many yarn bases, I intentionally don't dye all of them right away. So that way, if there's a base people want more of, then I can shift and dye more of that. But I won't list more pre-order slots again until I have more of the yarn on hand. And so that order has also been placed already. But thank you for making the launch such a great success. What would I do with minis? Let me see. I'm just checking over the chat here. I'll come back over here. What do I do with the minis? Well, they can be really good if you want to do some kind of gradient or fade. The sets this year are 120 grams, which is plenty for a cowl. You could do a shawlette. There's lots of things that you can do, and having mini skeins gives you a little bit of control and precision over where you want the color changes to occur. Whereas if you have a gradient yarn, those color changes will happen where they happen in the yarn. And so there are pluses and minuses to both. I think I have a video where I talk more about why, like when you might want to dye a sock blank versus a mini skein fade set, and the pros and cons of both, because both of them can work for creating some kind of fade. Let's see. I believe, so Amy asked, do I worry about the accuracy of my measurement tools? Your scales, beakers, droppers, measuring cups, and spoons. Sure. I think that the most important thing is that if you are consistent with your own measurements. So if like you're using the same scale and the scale's a little bit off, it's going to be a little bit off the same way. And so that should still help you with some reproducibility. And again, you know, there is definitely some error with various measuring cups and stuff, but I would say like in many things, a like tiny percentage of an error, like a 5% difference in color maybe won't make a super noticeable difference, but it can, it definitely can. And so, yeah, I do have, I believe I should have the scale that I use and maybe my beakers linked. I do have knit picks and Amazon affiliate links and maybe some others in the description. So the zip ties, I don't, but I can add those in right now. I have them linked on other videos. So I should have them. Let's see. Let's pick this video. Kitchen scale and plastic syringes. Well, I have the digital kitchen scale listed twice. Okay, I'll put those, and do I not have my, I don't think I have the link handy for my graduated cylinders and beakers. The ones I had are plastic, which could definitely warp. But I do have a blog post that I'm going to put at the bottom of the tools and equipment that's like a post on my website to my favorite tools and equipment for dyeing yarn. And let me go there. Let me just show you, because I should link to a lot of things there that I use. Okay, so my website, okay, so gloves, my respirator, graduated cylinders. So this is the set. This is the set that I purchased, and it's held up pretty well. It's pretty inexpensive, and yeah. So this is the one that I got, and so that's linked on that post. I don't have it linked in the video description, but I'll try to remember to add that later. So I hope that helps. You got to discover it's broken. Yeah, the scale that I like the tiny scale for measuring out dyes because that's really handy. And it's handy for doing smaller weights. It's not as good for like weighing packages and stuff like that. But my stove is hot, so let's go over there. Aha. And I've completely covered up that little pan because, uh-oh, I've got to reset that camera though. Let's see. That camera likes to oh, come on. Settings. Well, here, I may as well show you while I'm trying to. Oh, come on. Let's see. Video capture device. Tennis ball, March 22. Sometimes that is really not happy, is it? Let me see. That camera is prone to freezing, and it was working this morning, but let's see. I'm trying a new kind of setup for some of my cameras. Come on. Why won't you activate? Oh, bollocks. What am I going to do here? Okay, let me see. Sorry about this, everyone. Because that camera, it works better. It's also the mic I'm using. Audio. Okay, let's try now. No, that just completely died. The fix. Oh! Nope. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to do. Where's the audio? Integrated. I did it yet. I had that yesterday, so where is that? I'm looking for the audio. Why can't I find the audio? Okay, I guess I'll have to re-add it. Audio. Device. Okay. Oh, that's loud. Okay, this should be working. Where is that? Okay. I'm changing the audio on. Oh, that's going to go away. So that can be fine. Okay, this is going to be confusing. This is going to be really confusing as I change it. Because it's like, it'll say the countertop. Okay, so I'm going to swap. All right, hang on for a sec. I'm going to swap some of the cameras around and hopefully that'll work. I always get nervous when I move cameras in the middle, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, let's see. Nope, I now need to, okay, well that at least kind of worked. Okay, that worked, and now I am just curious. I mean, it's not the greatest, oh dear, the greatest positioning. Okay. And I needed, I'm just seeing if I can get the other camera to work when it's plugged in a different way. No, the camera may have just finally died. All right, maybe I'll be finally replacing that. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we should be good. The audio, I have no idea what the audio switching is sounding like though. We will be replacing that. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we should be good. Okay. Because if I'm here, I'm using that audio. Here, no, I want to use. This audio. See, this is streams. Okay, so then I have audio there. And then that audio is over there. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Oh dear. So sorry about that. If I missed any questions, feel free to ask again. Okay, so in this pot, I have 16 cups of water. And I think, let's do 4 tablespoons of white vinegar. But I can't believe that other camera just completely died. I mean, I suppose I can. It would freeze all the time. Oh, thanks for keeping yourselves entertained. Okay, and so to do this, we're going to start. Well, just like how much yellow I want. Okay, I think we're going to start with just 50 milliliters of our 1% stock solution of Brilliant Yellow. Now, this may be more yellow than I want, but we're not going to necessarily use all of it. As I'm dipping the yarn, we're not going to do it until all the dye has exhausted. We might then go in to another color. So today I'm more dyeing by feel than doing like precision work, because when you're dip dyeing, the depth of shade you have on different parts of the yarn will vary a lot. But I do have back here a steamer basket. Oh, there's a big delay. So I just on the monitor, I'm seeing myself pour it. Back here I have a steamer basket. And so after I dip, when we're satisfied, we can steam set that yarn a little bit. But let's go ahead and start with getting the yarn. We get the tongs on hand too, and a pan. We're going to start with some stroll. And if I need to, I could bring a step stool over to help me get a little bit more height. I am going to just dip and what I do want to make sure that we're getting the yellow at the edge, but I think that's where I'm going to stop it. Again, it's possible we'll want more on the middle. And maybe I'll do one more dip just to sort of like even it out a little bit. Sometimes there's some resist when you dip dye of the yarn. But that's just a very, very quick dip, and I'm going to pop this end into my steamer basket, sort of leaving part of the yarn out of the basket just to help that color set a little bit. There, okay. And so that's just to get a little bit of some yellow on there to start. There's Peter. You tried to dip some red and blue food coloring and it didn't go as you had hoped. Hard time getting the purple. Yes. If you want to get more purple, start with very little to no acid. Purple food coloring will break beautifully. I have a ton of videos on it. It's actually a feature I adore, but that does absolutely happen. Okay, and next I've got our Swish DK, and there's already a lot less yellow present than there was before. So what I can do here before we go and get more dye is I can, I guess as I am dipping, go longer to absorb more color, which may not get as bright at the tip as it did on the stroll. So this one is 100% superwash merino. But I do think I want a little bit more yellow. But the nice thing, well, we have absorbed most of the color. The nice thing is that we already have a fairly light yellow along the tip. So whatever we dip in, we're only going to need to be pretty quick to get that there. So let's add, I'm using this like mini beaker. I'm just going to add 15 milliliters of the Brilliant Yellow. And so then eventually we'll dip the other side. But the reason for me steaming the end that we added the color to is so that way when we dip into like a pink, we don't want the yellow to come back out into the pot if it wasn't well set. And so that's why we're doing things this way. Okay. Now coming in with our yarn just a little bit to make that a bit more intense. I'm going in a little bit more to blend it out, but the tongs are too far away. Can I reach it without making a mess? Yes, I did it. I did it. Okay, and now this, I'm also going to pop into the steamer basket, leaving the white part of the yarn sort of out, just letting this get some heat. It's not going to be perfectly set, but we can steam set properly towards the end. Or with the pink, we can even leave the yarn in the pot and like half out to like set the pink part, and then we'll be able to proceed. I'm not worried. Now, I will also probably want to add more yellow to our multi-nep yarn, but we can start with this to get more of the light yellow over the areas. You might notice with this multi-nep yarn that the color, the base color is deeper than it was for the other colors. The base color is a fair amount, like a little bit more gray, just because we have, and actually, I'm just going to set that aside for a moment, because we have a little bit all the way through of all these colors running through it. And so that gives us more of a grayish appearance to start with. But I do want more yellow here. And Brilliant Yellow does set pretty quickly. Let's do, once again, we'll do about 15 milliliters. And add some more. The pot definitely is getting a little bit colder as we add more like yarn and stuff to it, because the yarn I pre-soaked for at least an hour, but the yarn was definitely very cold when first bringing it in. And so we do, as we dip, want to like stir. The thing I like about dip dyeing is that it helps the color transitions have a softness to them. Because if you leave the yarn and let it sit, then you'll get a harsher line in there. But the yellow here is definitely less bright, I would say, than it is on the other yarn. It is also not striking as quickly, which again isn't like a huge problem or anything like that. But I don't think have I broken violet on this base yet? Hopefully you can see all of those beautiful colors that we have in the neps. But the yellow on this is really fun. The yellow neps aren't going to show up very much on the yellow, but they should show up on the pink. And when we get ready to move the zip ties, which unfortunately the counter is out of commission unless I can get that camera to work. Laura, no. That blend with the neps is a merino and then Donegal nep blend. Do I need to steam set dip dyed yarn? Only if it's not in the dip dye pot very long. And so because I only had each one in here for like a minute or two, it definitely soaked up some color, but I'm steaming for not super long, just long enough so that way when I do dip in another color, it's not just a sponge effect, that the color is actually in there. But yeah, the next one did seem to be absorbing the yellow a little bit slower. Okay, I also have one more skein of yarn pre-soaked. And of course, I think I threw away the yarn label. Let me see if I can find it actually, because I need to remember exactly what it was. Okay, shadow. I grabbed a lace weight non-superwash yarn. So I grabbed Shadow Lace, which is just 100% merino wool. And I thought that we would do some with just the dip dyed colorway on only 100 grams of this yarn. But part of me is also wishing that I had prepared something super long, like a gradient skein or something with this colorway. So this is just 100% superwash merino, and I want to add, we'll be using this with the pink, but I'm going to add a little bit more acid. Colors will strike slower to non-superwash wool than it does the equivalent superwash blends. I do want to be careful because this is non-superwash, but when thinking about spring, thinking about some lace got me excited. And so I don't think I'm necessarily even going to add more dye. I am going to dip slower and let some of these yellows come up further, but I think that the softness is very, very pretty. And so the goal in the end is to only have like a little bit of yellow. So yeah, we'll see. But the thing that also that we can do is we can dip dye with not very much color. And when I do the pink, I'm going to start less and then add more. So with the yellow, I added a lot more dye and then dipped until I was satisfied. With the pink, if I start too much, then it's going to be harder to like pull back from that. So yeah, but I think this one, rather than steaming, I will likely leave like this for just a little bit. But I'm going to reduce the heat, and the reason why I'm sort of angling the pan a little bit, and maybe I should do it like this. There we go. Is just so that way it's not touching the pot, and so it won't get too hot or dry out. But this one is like a much softer yellow here. Okay, I'm gonna set, oh, I already set a timer. I'm gonna redo that timer because I don't remember if I set it after I put the Donegal neps in. So I'm steaming the other 3 colorways for at least 10 minutes. You know, probably closer to say 15 minutes. So that way that yellow can be more set. But I think that depending on what the dye bath is doing, the very tip of the yarn, I'm never going to add all the way into the dye pot. And so it's possible that I may want to steam set the yarn after, even though things are going to be mostly set. But that's something that, you know, actually, I'm coming in front of the camera, so I'll be right back. Plugging in the iPad monitor. That way I can see chat when I'm over there. Okay, cool. So the reason why I may not to steam is that if we're going to speckle on tops of some of these colorways, which we may, depending on what we think, if we're going to speckle on it, then I definitely don't need to steam it, because we'll put a steam pan on the counter and it'll get some heat from the immersion setup. And so, yeah, I hope that makes sense. So I always try to aim these days, and I know I probably did things differently in the past, but I try to aim for at least 30 minutes of heat from when I last added dye is usually my goal. So, Beth says she came in late. I just dip dyed a bunch of stuff into some yellow to get started. And then my other camera is not working, although I might see if I can fix it still. It was working this morning. Okay, yeah, so this should be. I'm just testing. Nope. Nope, that camera died. That camera is, I think, tennis ball. May need to just be replaced, which is funny. I wonder if it would work for Keith and I could swap with the webcam I once gave him. But this one has been shorting out and things on me, so it's probably time that I just replace it. Thank you. I'm really excited about the inspiration photo as well. And so, yeah, we dipped in a little bit of yellow, and some of the bases, which is Knit Pick Swish, Knit Pick Stroll, and then Wool to Dye For's multi-nep yarn, which actually I should add a link to that. It's not an affiliate link, but multicolored nep, the sock one. It's 2-ply, high twist, and this will be in the okay. I just added it to the description, so that way you can easily find it if you want to learn more about the base. Irises are my favorite flower in the world. I wanted them for my wedding, and everyone was like, no, they're too delicate. And so I was like, but they're my favorites. I want irises. But the season was also wrong. So your first daffodil's about to bloom. I have crocuses blooming, and my daffodils are all very sprouted. You recently dyed some camel yarn. It was interesting to see the colors of the base that has a different color to begin with. Yeah, it's really, really fun. And so that's actually one of the things I'll do in the summer mini skein mini series is dye like the same colorway on a lot of different bases to see how like they look. And so a lot of times things may be similar, but sometimes they are more different, especially if the base is very different to start with. In this case, since we don't have this exact same amount of dye on all of them, it's not exactly the same, but this is going to give us more wiggle room for playing around with. And so I am excited. And yes, I have a timer. I was going to stand up and go check, but then I remembered I had a timer. And one thing I should do after I remove the yarn from the steamer basket to cool is to add more water to it, because the lid is ajar a little bit because I have some yarn sticking out of it, so we don't transfer the yellow onto the yarn where we intentionally left white. So remind me to add more water. Some of the irises I have belonged to my great-grandfather, and my parents have moved them from California to Indiana, then Indiana to Michigan, and then Michigan, they brought me some out here. And actually, now that they're living in Massachusetts again. Actually, they may have done California to Massachusetts, then Indiana, then Michigan, then back to Massachusetts. But I have some of those in my yard. And so that is fun. I actually also, speaking of flowers and yarn, I grew a bunch of marigolds last year, and I collected those because to do some natural dyeing with. So I collected and dried petals for that, and I'm planning on growing more this year because I don't think I have quite enough. You need, when you're using natural dyes, you need a lot of material to dye the yarn. And so, what was it? I guess it wasn't, excuse me. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before where I like gathered pounds of dandelion flowers. And so that was hard, but actually I might take my forsythia. That turned a really pretty yellow. So maybe I'd do the forsythia again. That was a lot easier to harvest than the dandelions. The dandelions required a lot of like me going to like random patches of grass and wondering if people wondered what I was doing gathering dandelions. So you want to make a different microscapes as color swatches so you can see how depth of shade percentages look on different fiber blends. That is something that is very useful to do because, so the depth of shade is the grams of dye per 100 grams of fiber. So a 1% depth of shade is 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of fiber. But when you look at the depth of shade and compare it, you're looking at the depth of shade of one dye color on one yarn base and comparing that to itself. And so a 1% depth of shade on superwash wool may look very different than a 1% depth of shade on 100% silk. On that silk, you're going to need a lot more dye to have a color that looks equivalent. But yeah, so the depth of shade is the numerical recipe reference versus a measure of the color value that your eye sees. And so it's a way of talking about like comparison wise, like how saturated you're trying to make that color. But yeah, I am very excited about all of this. And, oh, nice. Oh, nice. Oh, I haven't done, I don't know if any of you are doing Wordle, but I haven't done it today yet. So no spoilers. But I do that in Quirtle most days. Quirtle is like Wordle, but that you have 9 guesses to guess 4 words. And so the strategy is a little bit different because than what you might do with Wordle, but it's fun. And I think they pick the 4 words so there's enough overlap in letters so that way it is more possible. But we have a dedicated chat for my friends, and so I was getting notifications about that. But with the launch of the Summer Mini Skein mini-series, I did also launch a lot of new yarn as well. So I have some new colorways. So there's the Summer Mini Skein mini-series, but we also have some lace, 100% lace, which is expensive, but that's because the bare yarn is very expensive and is like over $20 for the yarn. So that's why the 100 grams of lace weight silk is expensive. But we have a sparkle yarn, and then there's a sparkle yarn that has Selena and silk in it. And so that video is coming up, I don't remember, soon, very soon. And I have, that was from before. But so yeah, not a huge update, but those yarns are now available. Okay, the timer is going off. And so, whew, hot. Okay. I am going to reduce that to low. And I am going to remove, we've got our multi-nep yarn. I'm going to get different pans for each of these so they can cool, so that way I can shift the zip tie. Oh, this is one of each. Oh, fine, I'll leave it like that. This is one of each of our DK and our stroll. That's funny. And then the other ones. I want to make sure. Ow. Okay. I want to make sure I put those back together correctly before we do the next round, but I'm sure I'll remember to pay attention to that. And just like I have over here where the pan set up, there could be some color wicking, but that did happen with the steamer basket. Some color came down, or maybe that's some steam condensing. Oh, there's a ton of water in there still. So I did check, and I do not need to add more. There is plenty. So that is ready, and these are going to cool until I can handle them, because yeah, otherwise I don't like almost burning my fingertips. You don't need to be there. You can be over here. Cool. And this friend we can check on. Yeah, that's looking fairly clear. I think with this one, I'm debating what I should do. I'll set it aside. I'll set it aside to cool at this stage. And I was just observing. Wiping off the back. Okay, cool. So now, let's see. Everything is very steamy. Let's wait 10 minutes. And then at that point, I should be able to comfortably handle things. But since there's nothing interesting up there to look at, I'll come back over here. And yeah, feel free to drop questions in, because a lot of the dyeing process are some waiting stages. And so often when I am dyeing yarn for and filming videos, I will do a few videos at once. I'm not necessarily limited to 2, because there's 2 sides of the stove. So sometimes it'll be just 2, but other times it'll be more, because if I'm doing something that needs steaming or a cold start, sometimes I'll have something going on the countertop as well, and then I'll move it over to the stove. But actually, I do want to email myself a reminder to replace the tennis ball webcam, which it's called that. To me, replace. It's called that because I put a tennis ball sticker on it so I could tell the difference between it and another one. What does it mean when a dye crashes out? When a dye, so when we're dyeing yarn, you want to dissolve the dye in water because you need it to be somewhat dissolved so it can bind to the yarn. Sometimes we do apply dyes in powder form, but they do need to dissolve and be wet and in solution in order to access the yarn. When a dye crashes out, this is a term of having something that is no longer dissolved but becomes a suspension with particulates in it. So if you think about like sugar water, if you dissolve a lot a lot of sugar in hot water and let it cool. Sometimes then you might get the water might start to appear a little bit more cloudy if maybe that works more with salt, but if the saturation point, typically for any kind of molecule, there's a limit of how much of it can be dissolved in liquid. And sometimes if it's hotter, you can dissolve more of it in liquid. So you can actually make, sugar was a bad example because you can make super saturated sugar solutions when hot and then cool it down. So there's typically limits of what you can do. But in some conditions, say with red number 3 in the food coloring, in acidic conditions, it goes from being dissolved in the liquid to then returning to a solid, like a more solid particle that you could see and you could strain out of the liquid pretty easily. And so that's something, red 3 is the one that is one of the biggest offenders of that, but there are some acid dyes which will end up being much more of a suspension, or sometimes you might have a dye stock and you notice that there's powder settling at the bottom when it seemed to have been well dissolved when you were setting it up. And so that either could be that it wasn't stirred enough, or that some of the color was crashing out, and so you might want to shake things up really, really well before doing it. So I hope that was a very long-winded way of talking about that. But there can be different conditions, such as pH and temperature, where things are more soluble or less soluble. And so sometimes having like some salts can help some things dissolve a little better and stay in solution better. So there can be various things like that. You like the brain work going with Wordle? Yeah, I enjoy that. Yeah, so it's sort of the crashing out, I guess, is a term that we would use in the lab and stuff. And so a lot of times when I would be making stock solutions of things, you'd do it on a hot plate. So you'd have a hot plate with a magnetic stirrer going, and you'd stir until the liquid looked clear. If it's cloudy at all or translucent, then it's not like dissolved yet because you're seeing like some of the particles. But then sometimes when it cools, then if you start to see the like white of the powder like settle at the bottom and stuff after it had previously been clear, we're like, oh, it crashed out of solution. But you can take advantage of that with chemistry and intentionally crash some things out of solution, like when you are doing a synthesis or something. That can be a way to isolate a compound by taking advantage of some of those properties. So there are reasons to make things crash out of solution on purpose. But in terms of dyeing, with the red 3, like with that bright pink food coloring, if you have it with acid like too soon, then you'll start to see a pink film on the top of the surface. So yeah. But yeah, I'm like, oh, it crashed out. Because I guess, I don't know, that's what I would say in lab. But yeah, we had in undergrad in my orgo lab, we had a really fun project where we had a mixture of 2 compounds and we had to separate them and identify them. And so there's a lot of different things you can do to separate things in a mixture. And so that was a lot of fun. Yeah, well, so sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to go too into the weeds and lose people with chemistry, but also like, so if for people that don't know, I have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular pharmacology, but my science chemical understanding of dyes is not necessarily the strongest. And so some of these, I'm like, I don't know what their molecular structures are. And so I can't talk on like a chemical basis for some of the things happening, but I tend to slip into some habits from my scientific training. And so, yeah, I've always enjoyed sharing that. And so I started ChemKnits as a blog when I was in grad school. And then, well, now here I am. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, I enjoy answering questions. It is fun. And I like these live streams because it means I can reply to things real time. I do try to reply to questions that I get in comment sections the best I can. I don't see replies, like I occasionally might see a reply to like a follow-up question, but I can filter comments based on things I have not replied to, which makes it easy for me to answer new questions, even on older videos. If otherwise I'm just looking at all comments, like I would not see comment. Yeah. And so therefore, like, there's not an easy way for me to see a reply unless like I'm on the YouTube homepage and I see that notification. But if I'm in the YouTube like studio, the back end, then I don't see those notifications. And so then I might miss follow-ups. Well, I mean, there's some things that I can know about like approximate structures, but what I do know, because a lot of people who have developed these colors and use these dyes, we know that, you know, we need acidic conditions for it to bind to the yarn well and things like that. But when colors break, there are a few different reasons why you might see colors separating on yarn, or like on a paper towel when you dot the dye on there. On a paper towel, I think it's probably based on size. So smaller molecules can move farther than larger ones sometimes. But there could also be different chemical properties that mean that based on, you know, the actual atoms and things and the way that they're arranged, that could be why some things might not need as much acid to bind to yarn as others. So yeah, there's lots of things like that. Can't take the chem out of ChemKnits. No. I slip into professor mode. Well, it's really funny because my husband is a professor. And so, yeah, it's like the similarities sometimes between like what we're doing is like really funny, but his, you know, he has, you know, lecture notes and all of that. And so it's funny when we're talking and I was like, yeah, you know, I've just basically been lecturing for like however many hours in a stream. But yeah, it's very, very fun. And so, yeah, very, very, very fun. But yeah, I'm like, oh man. So when in high school, when I took chemistry, so my dad's a chemist, I would go into school. I'd come home so excited about like what I just learned. And I'm like, oh, this is so, so cool. And say something to my dad. And my dad would be like, well, actually, technically, it's like this. And so I don't remember the specifics. And then like I'd go back into school and be that annoying kid to be like, okay, but my dad was like, said like XYZ. And my teacher's like, well, yes, that's technically right. But like, that's more detail than you need at this moment, which is why we're doing this broader thing. That teacher wasn't necessarily the best teacher, but for other reasons. But at one point he was like, tell your dad I know what I'm talking about. Not in like a mean way. But he's like, I do know. But he was a fairly, yeah. He was like not the best of the teachers that I had in high school. He decided that, I mean, we didn't at the time have AP Sciences at the school, and we decided, he was like, oh, like we should have people take the like chemistry AP and like do extra study for it. So like I did extra study with like books and stuff. So I taught myself a lot of it and did surprisingly well, having not taken yeah. So I don't know. Chemistry has been a strength, although I've probably forgotten a whole lot. Yeah, I'm a second generation. I am. Yeah, but my interests were more on the like biochem side, and my dad is like a synthetic organic chemist, which I did do research in that at one point. But like synthetic chemistry is really cool how you can make things, and it's really cool like logic problems. So in a classroom setting, it's so much fun because you're like, okay, how can you get from here to here? But practically, you know, the yields might not be great, and so it might not work as well. So I enjoyed the like logic challenge of that, but actually doing it was not my favorite. You like it when I slip into professor mode? Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's go. Oh, I don't have a counter. So the other thing I tried today is, okay, so I have so many different inputs. I'm using 3 cameras, although one of them is kaput. And so at one point, one of the issues was that maybe I thought there wasn't enough power. So I now have like a powered, like external USB port thing. And so there's a chance that that still can't support 2 cameras, even with it being powered, which is what I'm trying today. Or that other camera just really doesn't work. So that's something that we'll have to see at some point. But yay for more academics in the chat. Okay. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so this is warm, but I'm going to try to do this on here and not have things get too hot. Okay. But so this is the lace weight yarn. I'm going to take the zip tie and just move it so the tie is at the most yellow end and the whitest end is at the other side. And so here's our multi-nep yarn. I'm not sure how well this is showing up on camera, but yeah, and if we don't end up with something orange enough for like a hint of orange in here, then we can always add more yellow. The other ones I'm going to do it over where there's laying because I'm going to just do it that way versus trying to bring them over. And I did move the stroll back with the stroll and the swish with the swish. Okay. So now we need to think about only a tiny bit of liquid there. Now we need to think about the pink. And so I have, okay, so I'm not going to use the fluorescent fuchsia because that's like way too pink, but I think the color I'm going to use will be deep magenta, but I want to do it, we're going to start pretty small with it because it's a fairly intense color. Do I don't know where my other graduated cylinders are. I mean, we're dyeing again mostly by feel today. I'm going to shake up this bottle. Ew. Okay, so speaking of crashing out of solution, I'm not sure if you can see, but there's particles down there. And so that is a reason why you want to mix up and shake up your stock solution bottles really well. In general, I recommend for anything with precision to mix up your dyes as fresh to when you want to use them as possible. Because that will, sorry. I'm just going to use approximately 10 milliliters for now. You want to mix up your dye stocks as close to when you're going to use them as possible for the most accurate results. Because as your dye stocks get like older, if things crash and settle on the bottom, then if you take just from just the top, then you're not getting the same concentration, the same amount of dye as you might think. And then later on, if there's more dye to volume, you're also not getting as much as you think. So that was just 10 milliliters of our 1% stock solution, which could be too much. or it could be not enough. And so we can layer the color and see, but we will be needing to add, as we add the yarn into the pot, we may need to dip faster or slower depending on the amount of color, but it's a little bit safer to build it up slowly. I'm hoping I'm slow enough than otherwise. Okay, but I think what I will do briefly as that heats up and before we start dipping again is that I am going to go on a brief commercial break. You may or may not see an ad, no pressure or anything, but I will be back in like a couple minutes. Hello, I'm back. I'm like, and of course now I'm just standing here slack-jawed as I'm reading. But yeah, I'm very excited for how these colors are going to combine, and I'm really excited to see what you all are going to create. Now, I know a bit about what these two colors do, so yeah, with the ratios being a little bit unknown from the yellows, we're gonna just have to go and see how this goes. And so, yeah, I guess that's all we can do, right? All right, because there's our pink, which is looking a little bit red, but it is pink, I promise. Hello, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Okay, put my gloves back on. Was I bad? I'm not. You should always wear gloves. Protect your skin. So you made a point of buying a pound of Dharma's Fire Engine Red Acid Dye because it was in clearance. Yeah, that one, I think I would recommend filtering it to filter out some of the particles. I forget if that's the batch that I have as well or not. There was Dharma had a bad batch of Fire Red. And so, okay. Tongs are here, and we are ready. See where we are. Okay. See where we are with our pink. That's actually not very bad. But I do want to get some more orange. And if the pink is too pink, then we could add, but look at how quickly that has soaked up. That soaked up a little quickly for me. You could always add a little bit of yellow to it, like a hint, if we want the pink a little bit less bright. But we've got some tones in here that are very, very nice. But we also still have some white areas. So I'm going to get a little bit more pink. And I'm also going to add just a couple drops of yellow. And see, I'm measuring in this goofy little container. And so I'm not sure how much it is. It's certainly less than 10 milliliters, but it's not very much. This can be the problem with having the acid be a little bit too high while you're dip dyeing, is that things can strike a little bit faster than you want. But also, we're dealing with such small amounts of dye that that's also the reason why things are going to strike pretty quickly. Oh dear, okay. So I'm moving, oh dear, the yarn and going in a little bit faster to get a little bit more coverage on those areas where I felt like it was too white. But trying to leave some of the yellow, and this is so pretty. Okay, what I'm going to do now is leave this like so and clean up a little bit of the mess I made on the floor. There we go. But doing that in 2 layers worked really, really well. And I think that the little bit of yellow we have at the end, we have a lot of pink, a little bit of some orange, and then that little bit of yellow, it's great. But I don't want to put that last little bit of yellow in the pot because I don't want to lose that yellow. So one other choice that we have here is to do something with like this. We could take, ooh, this looks so pretty. Take our tongs and then set it up in a way so that way not all the yarn is sticking. And I think we still have a steamer basket here. I think I want to give this 10 minutes and then I'll transfer it. I could transfer it to the steamer basket and then we'll go on to one of the next colors. But I wanted to see what I think before we pick probably one color that we might add some like speckles to, but I like the colors that we're seeing here. And in the chat, you guys can vote for if you would like to see me do the DK next or the multi-naps next. And I wanted to take a picture of this because I think it is glorious. Very glorious. Oh, this is a really good question. And I'm going to pop up my face camera while I sit down. Did I set a timer? I think I did. I think I set a timer. Ooh, wait, I think I can make a poll. Which I can do an official poll versus counting. Okay, I set up an official poll in the chat, I think. I don't see it though. Yes, I see it. Okay, it worked. So you can vote there. Okay, now I'm seeing it show up on my like little board. Okay, so there's a question. Why are you less likely to get bleeding if you add a deep color in layers rather than all at once? I don't think it means that you're less likely to get bleeding. I think that the reason why I decided to do it in layers was to make sure that I didn't add too much color because I didn't want the pink to be too deep. But again, I could build up that pink even further if I wanted to, but adding it in layers helps you get more coverage. So if the dye is striking to the yarn really, really quickly and you have white left behind, if you do another layer and maybe add the yarn in a little bit faster, you can get a little bit more coverage on the spots where you got less. And so hopefully that helps. I know, this is why I'm doing multiple versions, because I knew one of these gradients I was going to want to keep as is, and so then we'll pick one to put speckles on. The pull thing is neat. Oh man, I think, wait, I'm not seeing, it looks like the Donegal Neps is slightly ahead. But yeah, okay, so I'll probably do that. You've never had a pull in chat before? I always forget that that's something I can do. It used to be that YouTubers could add polls to there's a little like iCard. It's like a little card at the corner of the screen. Sometimes you'll see some information flash atop the top, but it's a way of like visually including links in videos. And you used to be able to add polls there, but they removed that feature. So yeah, I'll leave the poll up for like a tiny bit longer. Yeah, so the other thing is if you do some dyeing in layers versus all at once, is that if you take things too far and then adding color in layers also allows you to stop adding color. Whereas if you add it all at once, then you might end up in a situation where it doesn't all strike. So that's another reason why you might want to build up slowly. But yeah, because I realized, I was like, oh, I'm going to start like counting in my head. And I was like, there can be a poll. I could do this officially. All right, so it looks like we're going to do, ooh, it's pretty close. But I'm going to end the poll. We're going to do the Donegal Neps next. Thank y'all for voting. But don't worry, we will definitely do the DK weight as well. But the reason why I'm leaving this to sit in the pot, there's many different ways you can apply heat to your yarn. And so steaming is one way, leaving it in the immersion pot is another. And doing it a little bit longer this way means that if I put the whole thing in the steamer basket, I'm less likely to see transfer of the pink onto that yellow. Whereas if there was still some unbound dye in the pink section, but it had like sucked into the yellow a little bit, then yeah. But actually, maybe I won't put it in the steamer basket right now. Maybe I'll set it aside and then whichever color we decide we're not going to speckle on. So I'm not going to speckle on the Donegal Neps one because that already kind of has speckles. And I don't think I'm going to speckle on the lace weight one, but we will speckle on either the swish or the stroll. And so I'll wait and I'll steam it after and we'll just kind of keep it. So yeah. But I guess this is my moment to plug the pinned comment in chat. If you've not already pre-ordered your summer mini skein, or sorry, spring mini skein mini series set, those pre-orders have opened. And I'm very, very, very excited. I will add a few more of other bases as soon as I receive the yarn. I ordered more yarn of the ones that have sold out, so I can add more there. I am limited because I haven't heard about the order yet. So so that hasn't shipped or anything, but let's see, I ordered more yarn. I don't remember. I lost my train of thought, but those colors make me so happy, so happy. But yeah, so there will be, once I get more of the yarn in, then I can add more pre-orders, but I am limited by the extras that I have. So the packaging and some of the other things I'm putting in. So that will limit the total number of sets I'm able to do for this year. And so that is my limiting factor. But there is a chance that I will dye more than I need for the sets, and so therefore could have some of these colorways releasing at the launch of various nights. And so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I really enjoy dyeing minis. This series is pretty different from last year's because, which I mean is a good thing. Mixing things up. But those videos will air at the end of May. I think May 23rd is the Monday when it'll start. I don't know why I'm looking there because that's not going to tell me. Oh, yeah. What was I going to say? So the default, but Laura, I'll make a note. I'll make a note. The default for when people order multiple is for me to get to do different nights, but I will add a note on your order. I'll make a note to do the same night. Add note. Use the same. Okay, so I just added a note to myself, Laura. Oh, it's okay if it's different? Okay, fine. Okay, it's okay if it's different? Fine. Oh, because you can, with 2 sets, you could still make matching socks. Okay, I removed the note. Sounds great. Sounds great. But if any of you who ordered multiple, when you get different yarn bases, you know, they may or may not be possible to do the same night. But I know last year someone they had fingering weight and DK, and they wanted to make a matching, like, I forget if it was like cowl and hat. And so they asked if it could be the same night. And so there are some cases where different bases can be the same night, but otherwise I try to default to mix it up. We just knit while watching. Matching was the wrong word. I was like, oh, I could make that happen. Welcome to the stream. Aha, there's my timer. Okay, let's go back up here. Okay, so this we're not gonna set in the okay, we're gonna do the dongle nuts next. This I'm not going to put in the steamer basket because we may choose to speckle on this one, or we may choose to speckle on a different one. So I will set it aside. But if we aren't gonna speckle, oh, this is so pretty. The pinks might be a hair too bright. Like deep magenta could like deepen the pink, but this is so pretty that I don't really care. But in theory, I could add more pink and only dip to like here to preserve that orange and yellow. So that is a choice that we can make. But I want to look at the photo again. I mean, there might be a little too much pink. I feel like maybe Tangelo or like with a little bit of pink could have worked better. I'm gonna put this here to then look at when this pops up to compare this to the inspiration photo. But I almost don't care because I like this colorway so much. And so now it's like waiting for ketchup. Valentine blush, I'm trying to think about what the tone is like when it's darker. It could. I sort of went for the deep magenta because I had that like on hand already. So I think part of me would bring more of the yellow down a little bit more, but I don't really care. Because I like it. So therefore, I'm not mad. All right, so I think that what I did last time was started at 10, but I think I'm going to go up to 15 for this base. I'm trying not to make a massive mess. So if you're just joining in, all of these bases we've already dipped into brilliant yellow, and we're now bringing in deep magenta. And with this stage, we're doing 4 different bases. But again, we may do 2 layers, but I'm just increasing the pink because I feel like it. No such thing as too much pink. Well, you know, sometimes you have to consider whether you want to try to match the inspiration photo as accurately as possible, or if you want to dye something that is based on the feelings of the inspiration photo. And so I think that what I'm going for is more of the feeling. It's an exaggerated version of the flower, yes. So yes, adding more orange would make this pink less bright. It would make it a little bit more red. You can mix a red with the yellow and the pink, which is pretty fun. Okay, here are our Donegal neps. And we have noticed that colors strike a little bit slower on this base, but also the colors are a bit more muted on the base as well. Just because the base has like those other colors in it. So that is why. But I do want to make sure that as I'm dipping in, oh no. I have that too low. I also want to make sure that as I am dipping in, that the yarn is spread out a bit, so that way we can get more coverage. And I will do like what I did before, because I think I've got the deep pink there, but not as much towards the top to get more orange. But we still have plenty of pink in the pot. So I think rather than waiting, I might do that sooner. Ugh, but this is so pretty. You definitely get the yellow hints on the pink here, which is really, really fun. Okay, I'm gonna set you over there. And we're good there. I think that it had cooled off a little bit. I'm gonna add a hint more pink. If I was going to estimate, maybe 7 milliliters. Because I'm using, rather than a graduated cylinder, I'm using a little graduated beaker today, because I don't know where my small graduated cylinder is. Yes, I'm worried about the balance, but we'll play with the green on one of these for sure. So that's why we're doing multiple, to give options. Okay, so this time when we go in, we're going to go in faster to help us get more orange and to give us access. We're still going to keep some out in the yellow, but the first time we got a lot of pink. It just was, you know, more towards the bottom. And so this time we're still getting more pink, but we're able to get more of it further up, giving us those orange hues. This is so pretty. So, so pretty. And so then eventually, I'm waiting for that pink to get a little bit lighter before we go ahead and leave it in the pot to absorb the rest, because I don't want like a harsh line. But There we go. I'm gonna let this think. Yeah, I'm ready. Gonna let this sit in here for, I think, 10 minutes, and then I will transfer it to a steamer basket to set like all of the color for a longer period of time. But the pink there is more muted, and actually, because of the other colors sort of mixed in to that dongle base, it's a little bit more accurate, I think. Oh no, Julia, I know you were talking about color balance when you do it, but the green is a concern that I have as well. So picking the right green is something I am concerned about. I'm gonna come sit down in just a moment so you can see my face. I'm not writing down any of these proportions, which may make me sad later, but I suppose I can always come back and rewatch this video. But we're doing a lot by feel. Okay, so there's a question. If you missed in the beginning, but what dye am I using today? So far, deep magenta and brilliant yellow are the two dye colors. You're using green, Heather says you're using green in yours. You work from primaries only, so it's a fun challenge to use the same yellow base in varying depths of shade and add either red or blue to get pinks and greens. That is awesome. That is awesome. And I think that that's one reason also why, oh, this is where I wanted. That's also one reason why I am picked deep magenta, because deep magenta and brilliant yellow are two primaries from Dharma acid dyes. Dharma has a few colors that they list as primary, or by a few, I mean a fair number, but in their kit, in their starter dye kit, the pink that they have in there is deep magenta instead of, say, fluorescent fuchsia. Excuse me. And so, yeah, that's one reason why I started there. I mean, for green, I definitely could. The only problem with working with primaries when that comes into play is when you want different colored speckles. That's when, like, some of the premixed colors come in a little bit handier. Oh, fun. But I wonder where my moss. See, but moss, I have a colorway that I did, and the color of the moss speckles ended up pretty perfect for this, even though if you look at the color, you might not think that it's well, but it's such a great green for floral things. So I have a video with that that'll be coming up soonish. I'm now curious and want to peek at my schedule. It's like we got to see the dye schedule, right? Because I'm like, what video is coming out tomorrow? Okay, so that video I just mentioned will probably come out in a week. Tomorrow, this week will be a fun week. I'm not going to say anymore. This is a fun week. So Heather, you bought speckle secondaries for speckle purpose. Yes. Ooh, that something got me. You tried asking this question earlier, but did not see it in the chat. Repeat questions are always welcome, Lynn, because sometimes a question might go too far up the chat, and therefore I might not see it. I just haven't tried country. I've used country classic dyes once. I think I got a sample in a Paradise Fibers Fiber of the Month club, and so I used that once. I think the reason why I was not a huge fan of the country classic dyes was that they were already mixed with citric acid, and it wasn't enough citric acid to dye the yarn. I still had to add more acid in order to do that, but I feel like I like to be able to control when and how I add the acid to my dyes, and so that was maybe, Julia. So that is the reason why I haven't tried country classic dyes further. I also haven't tried Pro Chem dyes yet, which is mainly because I don't have space to buy a lot more dyes. Now, I absolutely would play around with country. Indy. Okay, I'll come get you in just a minute. I absolutely would play around with country classic dyes again in the future. Let me go let the dog out. But yeah, the citric acid in there didn't do anything for me. You can walk by the camera really quick. I don't know if people will be able to see you if it's too short. You can see your butt. Is that okay? Okay, 4 more minutes. We'll check on this. It's okay if not all of the color finds in here. Like, that's not going to be a problem for us at all. But most of it has so far. Because we'll be using the same pot and the same colors. Who let the dogs out? You guys are hilarious. Okay, so another question from Amy. I know that red, blue, and yellow are primaries, but primary in this context means only that color is derived from a single pigment, right? Yes. But typically those dyes are also in the red, yellow, and blue realm, whether it is a more cool toned version of those colors or a more warm toned version of those colors. So for primaries, the two main kind of sets that I talk about would be red, blue, yellow, but then also a cyan, magenta, yellow. And so if you're only going to pick one type of primary, the cyan, magenta, yellow is more versatile, because if you start with a blue, you can't get that cyan, turquoise blue color from that. But if you start with a cyan and a magenta, you can get that more blue by mixing those together and adding some red to the cyan color. And similarly with the magenta, you can make a red by adding some yellow to it. Not enough yellow that you turn orange, but some yellow to it. And well, this is something that I may talk about more in an upcoming video this year. So, Lynn, are you not adding extra acid with your country classic dyes? Because yeah, I found that they definitely needed some acid, and I didn't like that I didn't know the proportion, and I feel like that, like, since the dyes are already diluted, I'm like, the thing I would like to do is see how they do for speckling, but I'm not sure what the ratios are in there. So, I better get the dog. You asked because you noticed that not all blues, reds, or yellows are labeled as primaries. Yeah, so we can go to the website and look at colors, actually, momentarily. Should get the dog back in first, but or I'll get the dog back in second. It's not barking yet. Ooh. Wait. I want the other audio. Because that's the right audio. Okay. This is better. The audio over here. And hopefully I'm not clipping because I have to be louder with the other camera. All right. So here, you know, some colors we've got like fire engine red, brilliant yellow, but like sapphire blue isn't a primary. Caribbean blue is a primary. That's actually a super bright blue. Fluorescent fuchsia is a primary. Deep magenta. True black's a primary. Sunflower yellow, although it tends to look a little bit brown, which is weird. Peacock blue is a primary. Fluorescent lemon is a primary. Yeah, so those are the main primary hues in Dharma's line, which, oh, Indy, you want to come back in? Wow, that is unusual. I think he knows I'm springing. All right, we'll come back to this after we do the next color, and we'll talk more about colors. Yes, Indy, I will give you a treat, and then, nope. That's where I want to be. Okay. I'm going to turn off the timer. I'm going to get the doob a treat. Indy. Yeah. Thank you, sweetie. Hopefully he will be he will continue to be well behaved for us. Okay. I am now going to pop this yarn. Oh, I want the monitor. So I want to be able to see. Make sure you can see. The website that I was on was Dharma Trading Company. That's where I buy most of my dyes. I know some people, oh, this is so pretty with the yellow and the pink. And as I'm putting it in the steamer basket, I'm arranging it so that way the yellow is not touching the pink. But I will steam set this for probably for 30 minutes, I would think. That's what I'm going to do. So Dharma, oh, but I arranged it kind of like that in the steamer basket. We're going to do the Swish DK now. What was I saying? Dharma they charge for actual shipping. So that's worth factoring in, but their prices for some of the dyes are better than some other sources. I think that, Knit Picks and Dyer Supplier both sell Jacquard acid dyes, but the dyes are cheaper through Dharma if you buy there. So, how to get a mint color with natural dyes or acid dyes? I will, Anne, ask that again when I'm back at the computer because I can remember the name of the color I like for a beautiful sort of minty color. Okay, so I think I want to start again with about 15 milliliters of our deep magenta. Now, the Swish DK doesn't have nearly as much yellow as the Stroll did. So we'll need to keep that in mind. And I'm also going to have to keep in mind that the colors are going to strike a little bit faster than they did on the last yarn we looked at. Okay, stirring it up. And getting the tongs ready because it helps me sort of wiggle the yarn, keep things from bunching up too much. So I'm going in faster than what I did with the multi-neps. And so we may still want to add more color, but this is helping me start with getting some of that more orange hue that I wanted to make sure that I got. And because we really just want to keep a little bit of the yellow. But yeah, you can see how quickly we are soaking that up. And we'll check for white patches in the other section, but I think that it did pretty well. But sometimes when you have two skeins, if they're held close together, then that limits where the dye can go. And so, yeah, I mean, this is working pretty well. I do think we'll do a little bit more color, even though the coverage is pretty good. But see how quickly that went? That went so fast. Okay. I think again, I'm going to do what I did with the nets yarn and do something under 10 I am staining my shower curtain today. Oh, ha! I added water to this before I had poured it in, which isn't a bad thing to do. All right. I am really enjoying this colorway. It's amusing to see how much of a delay there is. And so before we go in, I want to just sort of like shake the yarn out, separate it, move it, so that way things will go a little bit differently in terms of placement as the last time. But I'm still going in pretty quickly. Just getting a little bit more coverage overall. But that, I think, is pretty good. So at some point, we will set up another poll over, you know, whether we want to do more speckle onto like the DK or the fingering weight yarn, assuming that I'm still going. Occasionally, I do get tired and have to stop. Oh man. Okay. So far, so good. And I will set a timer for 10 minutes. But then we have one more. We have the shadow lace that we'll dip dye as well before I swap out the pans and equipment and stuff. And we think about it bringing in some more of the backdrop. Okay, let me see here. There were some questions. Okay, you plan to use Knit Picks Cotton Reflections in an Afghan. So if you want to dye cotton, make sure that you're getting fiber reactive dyes, because acid dyes will not dye that base. And so, excuse me, you'll need some soda ash, but then it should dye really well with fiber reactive dyes and soda ash for a cotton linen blend. Oh, okay, I see people are saying that in the chat as well. Okay. Is there an easy explainer for why protein fibers and cellulose fibers require different kinds of dye? And then I'll go to the mint green. The easiest explainer is that there are different kinds of molecules. Chemically, nylon is very similar to proteins, and cellulose fibers are the chemistry of them is very different, the way that they're structured. And so it's in a way that, if you think about with like a lot of plants, there's like fiber that we can't digest, but we can digest proteins because of the way that they're made differently. And so that's a reason like we don't eat grass really, because there's not a lot of calories and things that we can get from that because of like our inability to digest some of those fibers, which can then turn into the cellulose based fibers that we use in clothing and things like that. And so because of the chemistry being different, of being a protein versus being, I mean, it's like a type of sugar, the cellulose base. Because the chemistry there is different, technically you could dye a wool in the same conditions you can dye a cotton. It might degrade the wool a little bit, so it's not recommended, but wool absorbs color very easily and the cotton does not. Okay, so yes, thanks for re-asking the mint question. So natural dyes, oh, I don't know, but Spearmint Breeze is an excellent minty color. And I think I can find an example. Oh, I'm not on the website, web browsing. Okay, so Dharma Spearmint Breeze is an excellent minty color. And I want to see, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to find it quickly. because I was like, oh, I just launched, because with the summer mini skein mini series or spring mini skein mini series, I'm going to keep saying summer like a million times. But if I go back through all of those, I sold yarn dyed with that. Here we go. Okay, so this yarn was dyed at a 1% depth of shade of Spearmint Breeze. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful minty green. Of course, you could mix a color like this using a little bit of, with a proportion that would give you a good teal and then diluting it. So with some like brilliant yellow and Caribbean blue, I think you can mix something here. It would take a little bit of trial and error, but you can do that. Oh, I'm glad I could help. I'm glad I can help with that. Yeah, that color has become what else did I use it for recently? I've just been very into that color lately, is one I've been very excited about. But yeah, so when it comes to like the primaries, you can do a lot. So yeah, I would use, what's funny is that the Caribbean blue, the color of it is a lot more like this true turquoise kind of blue. Like this swatch for the Caribbean blue right here looks deeper in a way that like it's a much brighter blue. Like it could be used as a neon in many circumstances. A lot of times I use frozen blue as my neon, but the Caribbean blue has a fairly similar profile, but it's more pigmented. So the starter set that Dharma offers has 6 colors. So I think this would be their pick for the 6 colors you should have. Brilliant yellow, fire engine red. Okay, so let's see. I'll just have them at the top. So brilliant yellow, fire engine red, Caribbean blue, dark navy, which I didn't pull over here, deep magenta, true black, and then where's navy? I don't believe navy is listed as a primary. I don't know how many pigments are in there, but on like one of their like info pages, maybe like one of these tabs, navy is listed as like under a primary section. So is it nope, not description, maybe instructions. Silk painting. Okay, so here they have a list of like the warm and cool primaries. And I believe for the blue, I forget if one of those was navy. Was 415 navy? No, 415 was midnight blue, so I'm not sure. 409. Yeah, so they did list navy as a warm primary. I'm not sure. So I guess 409 is just acid blue 113. So it is a single molecule, but it might not be what you think about as like a primary paint kind of blue. And so, yeah, so these are the 6 colors that they recommend you start with, versus using, say, a peacock blue, because you can make with the magenta and the Caribbean blue, you can make that blue color. And so, yeah, this is their starter site recommendation. I mean, you can also mix a red, but reds tend to be pretty pigmented, so I think it's easier to start with a red. But yeah, I think that, so that is the 6 colors that they recommend with the starter set. And so you could mix a lot starting with that, which is pretty cool. Did I set a timer? Let me check. I did. Okay. Let me see what questions. Crochet. Okay, knitting and crochet. Yeah, so I think that I'm hoping to do some more things with intentional mixing of color coming up, both playing around to see where you end up and then trying to maybe get more specific colors. But yeah, color mixing is not like a super strength of mine, which is why I like doing like a lot of triad projects and things like that to see what you can get. And then back in Hanukkah, I did a project where I took, none of them were technically primary colors, but I'd already done a blue, but I did a red, orange, yellow. Okay, the yellow was the one primary, a purple and a green, and mixed them with black in a lot of different ratios and saturations. And it's sort of like, look at all of these muted colors that you can create from like 2 colors in your collection. So you don't have to have every single pink, every single purple, but some people like to take it. And I mean, I enjoy using the premixed colors for a lot of things. So a lot of that does come down to personal preference. And cool. Navy usually has some orange tones that tone down the blueness. Yeah, so I think that when talking with dyes, as someone mentioned further up, which I'm not sure if I said out loud, there are 2 things that make a dye a primary. One would be, is it a single pigment in there? And so that means that when you use it, you're not going to see it separate into the different components that were mixed together to make that pigment. Which sometimes you only see. I should swap the camera. Oh! Well, that was convenient. Sometimes you only see that kind of breaking when you speckle. You might not see it with more immersion-based techniques, like this. This is really pretty also. Okay, so you might not see that with immersion techniques. I'll bring this back over to show. Yeah, so you can have primaries that are like single molecules. And this is the color. But you can also then have primaries that are the red, yellow, and blue that you can use to make every single other color. And so all of that comes in handy. Can you help with how to make more natural pinks and yellows? You want to make some rose tones or gold, but can't wear bright neons or neutral tones. You have jacquard dyes. I would recommend, Michelle, that, and I'll try to find the video to pop into chat in a moment when I sit back down, but I'm going to set this aside now. Those turned out beautiful. But in general, like when you're dealing with these primaries, the colors you get will all be bright. But then say, when we're dealing with the, say, an orange, if you add a tiny bit of blue to it, it's going to make it less bright and more muted. But those ratios will require either some recipes or some trial and error. Okay, so we've got now for the last dip dye, our lace weight yarn. And I'm going to start really low, like under 10 milliliters. Oh, wait, there's only 100 grams. So I'm not even going to add all of that. I'm going to add about half-ish of that. I forgot that this is only 100 grams of yarn versus the other ones have all been 200 grams. And so the yellow on here is softer than the other colors have been as well. Okay. And this we're now going to dip. And with this one, I'm okay with ending up with something a little bit softer. I wouldn't mind. This is 100% merino wool. It is non-superwash. And we may decide to add more color in, but I am dipping a little bit fast to help get some amount of orange tones. You can see that the color is getting lighter and lighter, just like with the other ones. But I think the coverage is pretty good. Maybe there's a little bit more lightness towards the inside of the skeins, but it's pretty good. Okay, I think I want to add carefully a little bit more just to help with some evenness. And so I don't think I initially measured out 10 milliliters total, but we'll use the rest of this dye. We'll make the pink a bit deeper, but the pink is not very deep at all yet. And I mean, it may not get deep because that's not what we're going for. But I'm rotating the skein, so what was on the inside is now more towards the outside. So that way we can increase the coverage of this color onto more of the yarn. And there will still be variation in there, but by starting with more color twice, it will sort of blend things a little bit more and make it a little bit softer. So I think that that is working really nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll set this for 10 minutes and then decide if we need to have it more time, or maybe we'll add all of it into the pot. What's for supper on dyeing day? On a big dyeing day, takeout usually. It depends on how much time I've already spent like cooking yarn. I do a massive clean before I convert my kitchen from a dyeing kitchen back into a cooking kitchen. But if I'm spending all day dyeing yarn, then that's when we'll usually get pizza or something. But once we've got this skein sort of somewhere, then we can talk about doing another layer of color on top of some of the other yarn that we have. But let's see. You don't have let's see. There we go. So you said you don't have a respirator mask yet. The one time you worked with acid dye powder, you used an N95. Yeah, I think that that's fine. Yeah, I think you want to make sure that N95 is well fitting. I mean, in general, I have never found any dye particles on my respirator mask because after dyeing, you don't want to get the filters wet, but I'll wipe it down to check. But I think part of it is also for just a safety thing. And the same thing with wearing the safety glasses, if you were to throw the dye in the air, you don't want to inhale it. You don't want to inhale any powders, whether it's sawdust or anything. So a dust mask, like an N95 would work fine. I started with an N95 before upgrading to the deluxe rubber respirator. I use, let me find. I use the one that Dharma has, and it fits well and is comfortable, but it looks like it's sold out. So this is the one that I wear, and you can replace the discs. I don't get a vapor cartridge because that's not necessary. I just use the P100 filters, which I can replace, but it looks like that the mask is sold out, but I do have a blog post. I think I have it linked here. No, maybe not. Hold on. I should probably have this linked below, but I do have, and I'll drop it in the chat. I do have a blog post where I got other respirator masks recommended by other dyers, and this came out around, those are pretty. This came out, when did I post this? in 2020, around when Dive to Dyeing came out, and it was hard to get masks because it was August 2020, so it was hard to get most kinds of masks then. But yeah, so there's some brands that other people recommend. Yeah, Carol, I was nervous this triacid dyes. And it's funny, I'm still a little nervous with fiber reactive dyes because I'm not sure, like, oh, will they make more of immense? Will they travel further and like beyond? Like, I rarely find, like, I will wipe down the floors and stuff. I rarely find any color on them unless like I dripped a drip of color walking across. And usually I know that happened and I can clean it up quickly. So, yeah, that's made me feel comfortable working in here. Okay, so can we talk about how to get more natural pinks and yellows? Yes. So I should have a ChemKnits color mixing playlist. Hopefully this won't get loud. Oh no, playlists. Okay. Mixing. Nope, why are you not showing me? Okay, well, let's try this. I thought I had a playlist. Here we go. Nope. Nope, I don't want to play an ad. I would not get any credit for that. Okay, so I have a color mixing playlist that I'm going to drop into the chat. And so I recommend when you look at that, what did I want to do? When you look at that, look at the colors that are more in the middle. And so I'm going to pull up 2 different videos. Oh no. Nope. Okay, pause that. And which other one should we do? Okay. Oh, this is on the wrong thing. Fine. There. Okay, and I want to bring the other video over as well, but we'll look at this one right now. So when doing color mixing, here we've got combinations of a magenta and yellow. These are all Jacquard acid dyes. This is blue and yellow and blue and purple. These 3 colors in the middle are much more muted. And so like this green, for example, is 2 parts yellow, 1 part pink, 1 part blue. And so you could get those more muted, softer, natural kind of colors by having some kinds of proportions of all 3. And you could expand one of these triangles to, or set it up so you have a little bit of all 3 colors, but work on expanding more of these muted colors. But the other thing, because I was talking about primaries, doing a cyan, yellow, and magenta, you have more range with these 3 colors a little bit. Whereas here with the red, blue, and yellow, all 3 of these in the middle are very, very red because that red is so pigmented. So using some kind of magenta or fuchsia is a little bit easier for doing some color mixing. So there's that. And then also for yellows, this was a Hanukkah episode. Okay, well, I'll just go here. So this was mixing yellow with black. And so let's see if I can find the blue. Okay, yellow should be next. Green. Okay, there's yellow. Okay, paused. So this is a 1% depth of shade of Dharma Brilliant Yellow, all the way to a much lighter one. So it does get less bright, and if you use a lot less dye, but then you can see, and maybe even with this little amount of black, that's too much to get something that's a tiny bit more like muted. But think about if you were using like a hint of, instead of black, you could use another color to soften that yellow a bit more. And so those are just two examples that I have right here that I can reference. Sorry to backtrack, but about Spearmint Breeze, the 1% depth of shade, does it have that? Oh, great question. Okay, let me see if I have that still. Okay. Nope, there. All right, so Lacey Marie said, about the Spearmint Breeze, and I said this is a 1% depth of shade. Does the 1% depth of shade, but does it depend on how much water is in the pot? No. So if you are going to absorb all of the dye onto your yarn, and you're going to add everything all together at once, it doesn't really matter if you're using 8 cups of water or 32 cups of water. The water volume matters for the overall technique. With more water, you'll get more even color coverage. With less water, if the pot's more crowded, you might get more tonal variation within your skein. But overall, the depth of shade is still like the same. Where the volume of liquid that you're using matters is when you have a stock solution. So if you have a 1% stock where you have 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid, the volume of that dye, like today when I'm taking 10 milliliters or 15 milliliters of that dye, that will influence the color, because when I'm measuring out that volume of dye, there is more dye in 15 milliliters of that stock than there is in 5 milliliters. But if I, like in the pot, if I had 2 different pots with different volumes of water and I added the exact same volume of the dye stock to each, there would be the same amount of dye in each pot. And so I would be able to get the same depth of shade. And so I think it can be confusing for people sometimes because a stock solution and depth of shade are both shared as percents. And so I think that that can be a little confusing at times. Okay, it has been 10 minutes and I haven't kept track. I know our yarn, our Donegal yarn has been in there for at least 20 minutes, maybe more. It has almost completely cleared. Okay, I think I'm going to give 5 more minutes to the Donegal net, and then I'm going to transfer this into the steamer basket. And then we'll think about doing some speckling. Although I may need a how we're doing, okay, I better plug you in. I use this so I can see the chat and make sure the video is working properly when I'm at the stove. Yes. Okay. I'm glad that that Lacey, that was helpful, because I know that that those concepts can be a little bit confusing. There is one other time when your volume does matter. It's if you're gonna, like, the volume, if you're using the exact same amount of dye and say have the same amount of dye in 10 milliliters or 500 milliliters, package was delivered, that matters for the technique. So if you're doing immersion dyeing and you pour 10 milliliters of dye on your yarn, it's not going to spread over the whole thing. It's going to be in a little area if you're in low immersion. Whereas if you take that same dye and add it to a liter of water and pour that on, the dye is going to go over more of the surface. So the volume matters more for technique. But when it comes to kettle dyeing, the volume isn't that important. Yes, and so definitely when you have your dye in a larger volume of water, it can make the dye look lighter, which can be a little bit deceptive. Yes. You remember when you first watched the triangle exercises, you're still amazed at how much difference in secondary color ranges you get just from starting with the lighter versions of red and blue. And yeah, I think that the reason why there's more variation there, the reason why there's a little bit more variation in some of these colors that we get here is not necessarily because they're lighter. It's because the proportion of the 3 colors is more similar with the way that these dyes are mixed. Whereas with a deeper blue and with, I think that's Brilliant Blue from Jacquard and then Fire Red from Jacquard, the red is so much more pigmented than the other colors that it dominates when set up like this. But if we were to set up a similar range, but use the red at a max of a 0.5% depth of shade versus having everything be at a 1% depth of shade, suddenly we would see like that would bring like this orange more down this way, this purple more over that way. And so you would be able to see more range you can get with those colors. But here at an equal proportion, you're going to get a medium green, it's more like blurple than a purple, but something that is starting to lean more orange. You're going to get more of those secondary colors a little bit easier, starting with things where the relative pigmentation is more equal. But that's something that is hard to know because these color exercises show that if I want to make a purple and I'm using blue and red, so this color right here is the 1-to-1 ratio. That's not very purple. It's like a purplish pink kind of color, but this one right here is a lot more purple. So that's 3 parts blue, 1 part red. And so having that, doing the exercise and knowing that information then means that when you go and you do something like what I'm doing today that is more free form, I have a little bit more feel about how the colors when I'm blending them together may work to give the colors that I want. And so the more you play, the more you have that information. Oh, he's good guard dog, but annoying guard dog. But actually, I will go get that package and come back. May as well not leave it outside. No, we didn't get a package. Maybe someone else got a package. Okay, there's 14 seconds left. So I turned that off. And the steamer basket is still on. But I'm now going to set you up there. Oh, what was that? It's like a little, oh no, that's just lint. I'm going to remove the color on our Donegal naps. That has been set completely. Ta-da! Set that aside, and I'm going to take this yarn and steam it in the steamer basket for 30 minutes to make sure that the colors are well set. And the reason why I'm doing 30 minutes and not just 20, because we did spend some more time in the pot, is just the yellow did not spend very much time in a pot on this one. Okay, and so that heat is off. That will get dumped shortly. But now we're gonna, okay, I think that what I'm gonna do now, as I think I'm going to set up a poll and go for a brief break. I'm going to probably eat like a cheese stick or something. And so then I will come back. But I'm going to leave you with a poll. And actually, let me show you real quick before I set up the poll. The two bases, because they look nearly identical. There are some definite differences. Okay, so this is our Swish DK. That's the colorway we have there. And it's a little bit more even, I think. And so here is our Stroll fingering weight yarn, and I just see we have a light patch. And so, yeah, that could be a great candidate for some speckle fun as well. But overall, the colorways are very similar, and both are beautiful. But I am going to take a brief break, and set you up with this pole. So I will be back shortly. I'm back, and I saw a really good question from Molly right after I left. When you call a color more pigmented, you mean that there is more dye pigment per gram of dye powder as opposed to the color saturation of the hue on the yarn you correct. No, I think that when I say more pigmented, like a red is much more like pigmented than yellow. I guess I use it in two ways. So sometimes for a premixed color, yeah, I might mean that there's more dye per gram, more dye molecules per gram of dye. So like Caribbean blue is way more pigmented than frozen. But when comparing colors like a red and a yellow at the same depth of shade, sometimes we don't know what the concentration of molecules are. And so one color molecule of red dye could be have way more dye molecules, like the color could be more intense than one molecule of yellow dye. And so since that's not something that we know or are aware of, like these dyes all have some kind of filler in it so that way you can use them at that 1 gram proportion. And so when I'm talking about comparing two colors and calling one more pigmented, it's which color dominates the color that you see. And yellow, even if there's a lot of dye molecules in there, yellows are like, if you get a yellow way too pigmented, it's orange. And so therefore you're never going to get a yellow that is more pigmented than a red, because in order for a color not to be pink, you need a lot of color there for it to look red. So I think that that's what I mean. So yeah, I think that maybe I use some things interchangeably, randomly sometimes. Yeah, I just had some cheese crackers really quickly. Yes, that's why I decided to dye some lace weight yarn as well in this. Yes, and so if you were, Molly said, if you're going to compare hues with a black and white filter, yes, so sometimes I do that with a color mixing exercise. I put on a black and white filter to be like, you know, in terms of like the actual like saturation value, the reds look darker than the yellow does. And so that yellow isn't really ever going to look really, really dark. But I saw something about a gray. All right, and it looks like the stroll, that's one I would have picked. So stroll is the one that we will dye. You tried a 1% stock of gray, silver gray, and it came out in dark gray. That can happen as well. I mean, when you go to Darm, for example, and I think that they may have swatches for cards as well, but we'll just deal with the Dharma dyes. When we're looking at these colors, what we're seeing is the color you would get at in most of them, I think it's a 1% depth of shade on silk. And so, okay, no, I'm wrong. To get the closest match to our color chart, for most colors, tub dye at a 1.5 to 2% on weight of goods. But then the ones with the asterisks use a 4%. And so on weight of goods is, again, a measure of dye per weight. But yeah, I usually don't use anywhere close to a 4%. But wool shows up more color. But they may use like volume and pounds. I like weighing out grams and talking about the depth of shade. But I think on weight of goods is like pretty much the same as depth of shade. But it's helpful to see like how things are defined. So, but yeah, so, you know, this is the deep magenta that I'm using now. The color I have is a lot brighter pink, but I'm using a lot less of the dye. And so, where is silver gray? Okay, so there's silver gray. You might need, on the yarn base you're dyeing, you might need less than a 1% depth of shade to get a color that feels like this. Otherwise, it might be deeper. And then there are some colors that look like vastly different than what we might expect. So, yeah, I need to reduce that. And oh, goody, dog wants to come in. Oh, that's not the camera I wanted. I need to reduce. Oh, nope. I want that timer going. Indy, I'm coming. Yes, I'm still here. But yeah, I'm back. I had a snack because my tummy was rumbling. But actually, I'm going to put you guys on Peyton. No, you don't get anything. You're a good boy. But you're not getting a present. I'm specifically not saying the other words that he would want. I'm just hiding how dirty my stove is. And I'm going to have to fix the camera. And let's see. Let's zoom in with hi, sweetheart. You're going to have to go in a little bit because tilt. There we go. Unfortunately, the microwave light is still not working, so we'll have that dark patch, but nope, that was not what I wanted. This, I'm going to make you smaller so I will still be able to see you. And let's do, oh, I saw this open. Raise the brightness a little bit. Okay. Once I'm dealing with dry dye powder, Indy will be crated and I will be wearing my rubber respirator and stuff. But before then, I don't need to. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and the swish I will steam set once I remove the lace weight yarn. But here is the stroll. And I don't think I want to like speckle all over. So we might just like focus on the pink. I haven't decided. Okay, and you, I want to steam set. Okay, organizing all of the yarn. But to this are 200 grams of stroll fingering weight yarn. So we've got some like lighter areas. But we'll have to decide together how we want to go about this. But what I'm going to do first is bring over some of the water that we were using already. And I'm going to add just enough to cover the yarn. Hopefully this won't de-yellowify the yellow, but I don't think there was any color left in it. So I don't know how much acid was in here anymore. But in general, like I almost could, actually maybe I will, because I don't want to put anything on the yellow. So what I might do, is this really long enough? What do I have that's long? Spatula? Yeah, that'll kind of work. We're going to try to keep some of that yellow, there we go, out of the way. So then if color spread, then we won't affect that yellow. So for speckles, could I do yellow on the pink, orange on the yellow, and pink on the orange? So yellow speckles would show up not super well. In theory, I could do something like that, but I think that what I want to use the speckles for is to bring in the green and some of the purples from the backdrop. So so that's sort of what I'm thinking, but I need to see what colors I have down here and what I need to go and grab. I do have like a golden yellow, an orange, and a pink, like as speckles like available. So that is something we could do as well. I've still got those like left over and made up. Doesn't it look pretty spread out? Yeah, so let me see what colors I have. Wait, I found that before. Okay. Okay, one of the colors I'm thinking about is deep purple, which we could only do that. But I'm going to go upstairs and try to find moss. So I think if I'm doing a green, I want moss green. And I don't think I brought that one down. My Dharma dyes are in 4 different bins. 4 different bins, and hopefully... Okay, I see my hand moving in. I'm always like, ooh! All right, so I am going to run upstairs, if anyone asks. I'm going to run upstairs and look for my moss green dye. I found it. It's like I used it on Friday, so. Okay, so here's moss green, which looks like it could be a little too muted, but it's so floral and pretty. I think it'll look good with these. But now we have to decide how we want to do this. So we could pick just one of the colors, like just the green, or we could do both and ignore that like purple in the background that I kind of put the text on. Those are both choices. So I am very curious to know what you think. I'm waiting for peach season. That would be wonderful. Yeah, so like the purple would look beautiful. The purple would look beautiful on the yarn. And if not trying to do the photo, I might only do purple. But I'm not sure. Oh, this is why I'm like thinking and debating what I want to do. And a lot of times this like thinking and debate is what happens off camera. It often is like the off camera part. And so while I'm thinking and debating and waiting to hear what y'all think, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so that way you don't miss the next time I go live. Of course, I can't control when you get notified. That's YouTube's department, and they don't always send out notifications for everything. So, but at least you can try. But yeah, so we could do like, I mean, because like purple on this would be gorgeous, but just green on this would be more like the photo. I think the green that I would want to use is moss, because let me see, I think I brought it downstairs. So here's a yarn mop I did recently, and you can see the like moss green from like how it came out of my hands. So some of it is a little more yellow, but it's a very, very great leaf green kind of color. So this was a yarn mop from something I dyed up on Friday. And I've not filmed the conclusions for that yet. So yeah, hence my debating. Would the moss green stay green if you speckle on it with the orange and pink though? Maybe not. But you know, you never know till you try. It all depends about proportion. There is the purple and blue in the sky. Exactly. Do you know if there's such a thing as indigo dye formulated to just be used in the kitchen in a pot? No, not for natural indigo. That indigo is very, very interesting. So in order to be, when it's in its blue form, which involves like oxidation to air, it is not soluble in water. For it to be, so in the oxidized form, it's not soluble in water. So when you're dyeing with indigo, you need to have it in its reduced form where it looks really green. And so if you look at my indigo dyeing videos, once I finally got the vat working, the vat and the yarn, when you put it in at first is green. And then when you remove it and expose it to air, then you see the blue develop. But you need it to bind to the yarn while it's in the green phase versus the blue. Because that's where the chemistry will happen correctly. And so therefore you couldn't use it like I'm using acid dyes because it wouldn't work, I don't think. So the problem was that initially, so the company I worked with was like wonderful. They sent me their like American grown indigo for that. But the recipe that they gave me at first for the vat didn't work. And so things like the iron or something I used, like it just crashed out of solution. And so I had to, that was a thing. But I was able to get it to work in the end. It's just we had all that like iron floating around. And so I do have, and I can get some like other kits and try that again. I would love to play with that again. But that one vat was stressful. Green speckles on the orange, then blue, green, then blue, violet down to the bottom of the pink. That would be very beautiful. I think I want to use a max of 2 colors today, just because, I mean, some blue would also be really pretty, but I think I want to stay with a max of 2 colors, just because that's what I'm feeling today, but I'm like going back and forth between them. Speckling with blue could give you more purple. So it all comes down to like, so when we were talking about the color mixing before, it comes down to the ratios. And there's a fair amount of pink there, but it's not necessarily that pigmented. And when you do a speckle, the speckle is pretty much as pigmented as the color can be in that spot. So if I used a deep blue, I think that it would look blue on the pink, but with a little bit of like maybe a purple halo as it spread out. And so because I don't want things to transition too much to purple, I want it to stay in a more pink family. That's why I picked a purple color. But this is what part of the dialogue is about, right? Because we would all approach this a different way. And so like these ways you're suggesting that I'm not planning on trying could work beautifully and create something. It's just like, yeah, it's just we all have a different approach. Yeah, so I think I'm going to turn the heat on there, and then so that way we can have that. Because I'm having to think, since I'm using straight powder versus powder mixed with citric acid, I want to be very, very careful with how much I'm adding. Mix the green and purple with some sugar together. So yes, I mean, the only times I use sugar to dilute the dyes is when I'm dyeing yarn with stellina in it, where the citric acid will dull that shiny stellina fiber. In this particular circumstance, if I wanted to dilute the dyes to get smaller speckles, then I would use citric acid. I'm very eager. Yeah, so for getting mega tiny speckles, that is an option. But yeah, I need more citric acid. Uh-oh. Hopefully this wasn't important. Nope. It was a spam. Okay, let me go to there. I am super eager for spring. Okay, we're gonna turn on the heat. And I mean, this already, it's cooler, but it's still warm because of what we had. I think I'm gonna start with the green because I know if I didn't use green, that people would be like, Rebecca, you forgot the green. So it is okay to just, and you can submit something in the dialogue just like this. We have some that will stay like that. It's just, we're going to take some more color risks on this one. Okay. And see, that heated up very nice and quickly because it's already warm. And I don't have the lowest immersion set up here. So we're going to see where things go. So these colors will spread a bit. Okay, I'm going to take up a tiny pinch of the moss green. And I'm very, very lightly putting it on the pink. Oops. Some places it's a little heavier, and it will spread and shift the colors a little bit in places, but it is reading green to me. And it doesn't have to be all over. Oh, so I can talk about the sugar in a moment. I'm going to add just a little more up there. Just little bits. Of course, I don't have a yarn mop today. But I do have some water. I'm technically collecting it, but okay. Dry off my fingers and I'm going to come in with the purple. Oh, this is just deep purple. Oh, that was a little much. Sometimes that happens. So I'm overlapping the purple and green a little bit, but I'm leaving some areas without too. Check out that restraint, y'all. Okay, and now I'm going to reduce the heat. So I'm going to set a timer for about 10 minutes to let that set. And in the meantime, I am going to remove our lace weight yarn from the steamer basket. Oh dear. And add our DK weight yarn. And we'll steam set that DK weight yarn for at least 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more, because I'll be using this sort of as a counter. So I will say to people who are curious, the deep purple speckles do read a little bit blue. And I don't remember if that's because the deep purple breaks the deep purple may break. But under this light, the deep purple, and maybe it's because of the contrast with the pink, it's looking a little bit more blue to me. But I like it. But the green is reading green even on the more pink areas. So, yeah. And I mean, like I could go and make each of those go further, but yeah, you can let me know if you think that I should go further with that or leave it in the smaller area. Where's my phone? I'm gonna take a picture. To include in the recap. And the color balance is not right. There we go. Okay, but I did want to answer a question about sugar. So I have a video where I tested doing speckles with dye mixed with citric acid, with salt, and with sugar. And that is because I had heard, and I had never tried it at the time, but I had heard that if you try to speckle, or if you try to dye yarn with stellina in water that has citric acid in it, the stellina will dull. And so a lot of dyers recommended that you use vinegar versus citric acid. But if you want to get super fine speckles and you want to dilute that dye with another powder to get that, then what do you do? And so I actually have a video, a more recent video, where I took mini skeins with stellina and put them in different situations, different pH with different amounts of, from straight vinegar to, excuse me, a water with maybe even a tablespoon of citric acid, like high citric acid and low citric acid, and found that in straight vinegar, the yarn was still sparkly. In a ton of citric acid, the stellina didn't even look silver anymore. It pretty much like became clear. Like it lost all of that silver, like it dissolved away or something. And so I now know that it is true. Do not use citric acid when you have a stellina based yarn. Just avoid it. I can recommend that surely, right? But so therefore, like, what do you do with speckles? And so salt, when you mix salt in with the dyes don't strike very quickly. It makes the dyes spread a little further. And so the sugar worked a little bit better. But so that's why I experimented with the sugar. The other time I experimented with sugar was making sugar sprinkles, following that to speckle with food coloring. And I did that because it was all just like food kitchen stuff. But hello. So yes, so really the situations where you might use sugar are few and far between. I also like speckling with the straight powder. Sometimes the colors spread a lot, but if you spread them out a bit, then they're more like localized in one spot. I'll just have to decide if, I want the speckles just in this area, so then we have the occasional pops of color, or if we want it more all over. I don't know. I'm not usually one for like restraint and only putting it in one little area. And that does sort of break up the whole like gradient kind of thing a little bit. But I'm curious what I'll think when we flip this, because doing it this way and with the amount of water I have, these colors may spread a bit. So we'll see. But this is why I did this colorway, the dip dyed colorway, on a few different bases. So that way, if we get something that I'm not as much of a fan of here, it's all good. It's all okay. Wait, what mesh? You watch other dyers use small mesh strainers to speckle yarn? Yeah, that didn't work very well for me. And when I try techniques, I try to think about mess potential. And so one thing I did like that I've tried again more recently is spice jars. I have some spice jars with a lid that I can close. That's important to me. I don't want a lid that's going to stay open. That way I can store it and reuse them later. And that works pretty well for getting super heavy speckles. But if you want them to be more spread out and more controlled, then I'd still want to use my fingers. But I have tried like sugar dusting wands and things like that. And the thing that I didn't like was that it's hard to get a rhythm to get the lighter speckles, if that's what I'm going for, and it's really easy to do too much. And so that's sort of what I worked on to try to figure things out. Oh, cool. I'm glad that that video, the dulling Stellina on purpose video was helpful. I mean, it was one of those things when I was like, this is something I've been told. I believe people, but let's try to do it on purpose because maybe like a little bit of citric acid is okay. And it's probable that if you use a little bit of citric acid by mistake, things may be okay. But also it could end up being less sparkly. And so, yeah, you don't know until you try. You tried Jello like one of my videos and it was mush. In the video, yes, in the video where I dyed yarn with Jello, I removed the yarn from the dye bath while the bath was still warm and immediately put it in hot water because that was a video that was requested. People wanted me to do it. And I was like, all right, but I don't want to encapsulate the yarn in Jello. So yes, I am willing to attempt things that may ruin yarn. My goal is never to ruin yarn. I've only, I guess, tried to ruin yarn on purpose a couple of times. I was going to say once, but no, that's not true. I mean, on one of them, I tried to see if I could get reverse speckles by using color remover, and that just completely destroyed the wool. Like, it ruined the texture completely so bad that I threw it away. So trying that, I wasn't trying to ruin the yarn, but the yarn was ruined. I did, for April Fool's Day once, make a yarn cake, and then baked that into a cake. So that was me destroying yarn on purpose. But it was April Fool's Day, and so... like I started the video with like, okay, you know, I'm using the ball winder, winding a yarn cake. And it's like, okay, then you get this funfetti cake box and follow the instructions to make the batter. And then I like put the yarn in it and it was so gross. But it was really funny. I like, yeah, enjoyed that. Yes. So sometimes I will wear like an N95 or my respirator with Kool-Aid now. I do enough dyeing with powders that like, you know, you don't want to inhale any powders because like, that's not what's good. That's just not good for your lungs. Right. And so, yeah, so sometimes I will do that even though like it is with Kool-Aid, I think it's also something about the amount. Like if you're going to use one of the whole huge tubs of Kool-Aid and like you're using that much like every day, then you definitely want to protect your lungs. If you're every once in a while using a couple packets, I don't think it's like as bad. But I lean on the side of recommending caution because of, yeah, I'm making YouTube tutorials. So you just bought a salt shaker set and it has a very fine on top. Only if you're dyeing yarn with Stellina. Do mix with citric acid. The sugar thing is like a very, very few applications. So I would go for citric acid because the citric acid will help you get the sharpest speckles because having that low pH locally also will help the color strike. So you notice that gel food coloring has sugar in it. Yeah, that doesn't really hurt anything. Like the sugar doesn't interact with acid dyes, and food coloring is like an acid dye. The sugar doesn't react with it at all, and so it doesn't really have any issues. Yeah, I mean, the only concern with sugar, and I tune out the timer, but I know other people might not. The one concern, ooh, this is really, really pretty. The one concern with sugar in yarn is that like you want to make sure that it is all removed because you wouldn't want to like attract ants or anything like that. from the cake joke. Some people got mad at me, but it wasn't a full skein of yarn that I was using. It was like some remnant. I'm just checking. It's not completely set, but it's good enough. And the good news, although I kind of wish it was going the other way. No idea approximately where I put it. Problem is that I'm reaching over here, so I may stain my yellow, but I'm going to put my respirator back on and do that. Mask, where are you? And the other tip I always try to say, make sure your fingers are dry before going into your dye containers. And I got these colors on the top of the jars by cutting up a poster. That's a hack from Kayleen at Little Bean Loves Yarn. Okay. Starting with the purple this time. Oh, see, there was a bigger clump, but that's okay. So it is possible. Indy is crated, so he's reacting to people outside, but he is not nearby. You can something off my fingers. Oh dear. Waiting for him to stop. Oh dear. UPS is outside. UPS is outside. Okay, but you can still get fine, small speckles when you are doing a little bit of powder. You just want to make sure that you're really, like, really not picking up very much. And so, and then as you release it, go really slow and careful. And this is not something that I try as much anymore. So like when I pick it up, I release most of it back into the container. So that way I can go nice and slow and have the control that I want where it is placed. And I always leave the covers on the jars as I walk away. And I reuse my gloves a lot. This pair is about done. Whew. Okay, so I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. Set a timer for 10 minutes. And we're going to wait. Whoa! Who was that? Was that you or you? Okay, fine. I'll crank you for a minute. But then I'll reduce you back to low. Thank you! I'm really enjoying it too. Oh my goodness. Part of me wants to just speckle these two colors all over, and I think that that would be really, really fun, but I haven't tried in a very long time. I have not tried to do a speckled colorway where I'm really keeping the speckles limited to a smaller area. I tend to, sometimes I'll do like a gradient and I'll do like heavy speckles and lighter and lighter and lighter, but here the speckles are limited in an area, and so we'll see. We'll see what we think, but I'm going for it. And thank you. I'm so glad you're all enjoying this colorway. I'm having a lot of fun. How long? What time? What has it been, like 3? Why do I not see how long oh yeah, 3 hours. Okay. I was like, why am I not seeing how long I have been on? So funny. The pop was the yellow end. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Because I was like, I didn't see it at all. I just heard it. So I was like, what? Yeah, and so then so I guess like I'll probably still want to open up. So the skeins right now have been like this. I've done that side, I've done this side, but then I'll need to open them up to do like that side. And so since I've only got 2 skeins in the pan, it's possible that the third flip opening it up would be enough because I'm able to spread them out a little bit more than if I had like 3 or 4 skeins in the pan. So yeah, it's always like a trade-off. Like it's easy to get coverage quickly when you have 1 skein of yarn in the pan, but if you want multiple of one colorway, then that's harder. So yeah. But I have to think. I'm probably done dyeing yarn today. Maybe this evening after dinner I'll do more. I'm trying to like think the rest of my day. I might do editing. Maybe. I mean, certainly I'll need to wash all this yarn when it's cool. Oh, maybe I'll film those conclusions. It's like, what's on my schedule that needs to happen before I go get the kids? And Monday I have a long day, so I have a little more time than normal, but yeah, I'm debating. So tomorrow I'm going to film a couple Dye Pot Weekly episodes, and yeah, and then of course I have SMS yarn to dye, and so you can see I'm going to pop in the chat. I mean, it's pinned in the chat, but the and with this I will try. And Hanukkah, I can't, but for this, I can try to combine orders. If you place multiple orders, I can try to do that when it's time for shipping. Just make sure you let me know. Question, if you dye yarn as a semi-solid, then heat set it. If you follow that with a layer of speckles, like blue speckled over yellow over dry yarn, so you can't speckle onto dry yarn. The yarn needs to be wet and the dyes need to be wet for the colors to bind. Now, if you were to take dry yarn and rub dry dye into it, like, would there be some staining? Yeah, but you need the acid and the heat, and so it needs to be wet in order to speckle. Otherwise, like, you'll just get dust that'll probably fall off, which is less than ideal. But so if you have a semi-solid and then you do like blue speckles on yellow, the speckles will probably look pretty blue. It depends though on the ratio. It depends on how intense your original yellow was, and it depends on how pigmented your blue is. So if you're using a premixed pastel, the blue speckles will still be deep, but there's a chance, like if it's a more cyan blue, that the yellow will make more of an impact. So the speckles might look more green. So that'll take a little bit of trial and error depending on the brands and things like that. Yeah, no, you can't. So if you mix the dye with citric acid, so acid is needed to dye yarn, but it's really the pH, which is a concentration that is required. So when you have citric acid, like dry, it's not, in order for something to be an acid, it needs to be dissolved in water. That's sort of the definition. Because, so an acid is like, okay, so let me get my little whiteboard. Okay, so for example, if you have hydrochloric acid, let's say, let's go big. Okay, so if we had hydrochloric acid, I mean, the chlorine is really a lot bigger than the hydrogen, but you've got, negative and positive, those attract, okay? But so when you put it in water, they separate. And so you have like the chloride ions sort of like floating around in the water. And then the protons are kind of floating around in water, which really the protons are interacting with the water molecules. So that's the oxygen. So you really end up with something like H3O plus. That's a little too much. But so we'll just say like the H pluses. So they separate. And these hydrogen atoms floating around in the water, or kind of being more attracted to the water than they were to the chlorine, that is what makes it acid. So that's what gives you the acidic situation here. And things that are more basic will actually take sort of one of the protons away from water. And so then you end up with like an OH minus around. And so that's getting a little bit in the weeds. But in order for it to be an acid, you need those hydrogen atoms to move somewhere. So they need to either move to water or move from water to, then it would be a base. But for acid-base chemistry, the protons have to move. And so if you don't have water, then that it doesn't quite work. And so it's still called citric acid, but for the chemistry, you need the water present for those things to happen. And so it's absolutely not a dumb question. No questions are dumb. And it's a reasonable thing to wonder if that could happen, because I'm sure we've all stained shirts and things by rubbing on bark or sitting on something dry in the past. And so that can definitely happen. But if you were to speckle dry powder onto dry yarn, then now it's possible you could speckle powder onto dry yarn and then steam set it, and that could introduce moisture, make the dyes wet, and then they could set. But you're likely to make a little bit of a mess in the process because a lot of the powder will fall off. Amy, but don't feel dumb. There's no bad questions. And so citric acid is called citric acid, right? And it's because the acid is like a functional group. It's part of the molecule, because that's the part of the molecule where the hydrogen will come from. And so vinegar is easier. So this can wait. Okay, so the formula for acetic acid, I believe, is CH3COOH. And so it sort of looks like, that. And so when this goes into water, it separates into an O minus and then the H plus. And so that's sort of like plus. And so this is like when you add it to water, it's sort of separating. And so that's sort of what's happening in vinegar. But it's the like this, and then having that proton available, which, because, you know, this proton, as I mentioned, it's sort of on the water. And so that could protonate. I don't know if we're protonating the dye or protonating the wool, but then that is available to go and help the interaction between, that's available to help the interaction between the dye and the yarn be strong. And so you need that sort of available there for that to happen. And so a pH is based on the concentration of these protons you have. You love when I get nerdy like this? I was like, oh, I need a whiteboard. But these are great questions because, you know, like these are very, very important questions. And I know not everyone that watches like has even taken chemistry. And so an acid-base chemistry was not my strength. What about speckling with a stock solution? So, like, you mean using the liquid to speckle? You could do that. I have a video recently where a few videos where I was adding speckles with drops of stock solution effectively. There's one video that I had where I did a resist first and did that on the countertop. And then there's another video where I had more water and I dried with drops of dye. And they spread out because I had a lot of water. So you could get speckles that way. I'm glad that I did it in a way I could understand. But yes, so I have added dry powder to roving, and then I did add that to water. So I inserted it in, sort of like Easter egg dye tablets. I was very nervous about making a mess there, though. Nope, I went here. Y'all, I erased my grocery list. I don't know what I need anymore. I think I have a pair of gloves ready to go over here. I think that was an old grocery list, so I think I'm good. So, Lacey, yes, or 2 months ago, I did a live stream with that, but then I liked that effect so much, I did make a standalone Dye Pot Weekly episode with that technique. Okay. So now, I'm gonna I need to use the tongs to help because just a straight flip inside out is not necessarily going to be that helpful, but actually, so like in here, I could use a little more, maybe like right there, but the coverage, again, because we only have 200 grams of yarn, the coverage is really, really good. And so, yeah, I feel like this could be the last flipperoonie that we do. Flipperoonie? What am I saying? All right, mask back on. Oh, guys, I know that daytime streams, and if you're watching this later, daytime streams might be less convenient. My brain works a lot better. Trying to dye at night and talk at the same time is a lot harder for me. Okay, so I'm really, really going in with just a bit. And so that's really fun. Really fun. Okay. Mossy moss. Cool, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna let this sit for 10 minutes. Well, the 10 minutes is really so that way I can know to remove the Swiss DK from the steamer basket. That's the real reason. But I'm also going to put away, hopefully okay, good, I swapped over the camera. I will be back. Let me wash my hands. There's like a tiny bit of color from what was on my fingertips. Not that much, so I'm not keeping it. Sometimes I leave dye behind. But I am filling the pot that I use for the dip dyeing, so I can soak that a bit. So the way to get the minimal amount of spread from your speckles is to do something on the countertop. Mix the dye with citric acid, and then the dyes will stay pretty much where you put them. You won't see that like spread that sometimes you get from like flipping the yarn. Sometimes you see the colors go through to the other side, but it also depends on the color. So these two colors I do speckle pretty well because I've used them a fair amount. But if you try to speckle, say, with Purple Pop, there's going to be a lot of pink spread because that's the nature of the color. I like that you can watch me while you're working too, Melanie. That's awesome. Oh, man. But yeah, I am getting hungry. Hungry. And let's see, what do I want to plug? Okay, so you all know, subscribe. I have an Etsy shop with my hand-dyed yarn, and you can find, if you want to support like on another level as well, I have a Patreon. One thing I don't know is YouTube keeps asking me to turn on channel memberships, and if I ever were to do that, it would be pretty much the same as the Patreon. It's just you could pick which platform you prefer. Like, I'm not closing the Patreon, and I don't know if I'm ever going to turn on memberships, but I know there's some people who don't want to use Patreon, so I don't know if that's something I'll ever turn on. But that's something I know some of you are patrons. I'll talk about that on Patreon and like pluses and minuses of turning that on. I wish there was a way that I could immediately like give patrons access to like the only things, the things from membership that are cool is that you can have custom emojis. And if you're like, the thing if like your YouTube, like the YouTube membership allows people who are like members, or I think who have joined, it has a button on the YouTube page, which is handy, but it allows them access to custom emojis and their names are highlighted in chat. And so that's something I wish I could give to ChemKnits patrons, but there's not that integration. You're feeding watering ducks during the video. But anyway, that's a big digression. That's something that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that I have Patreon and like not everything is based on one platform. But yeah, I always wonder. I haven't done realizing I have no idea what the audio is doing. Nope. Where is my control. Here we go. Well, that's not that bad. So yes, that is a consideration. YouTube takes a bigger percent than Patreon, but YouTube, like, it's within the same site where people are watching. And so I don't know, like, I don't know how it would go. I mean, it would be fun, and I have fun ideas for what, like, ChemKnits custom emojis would be. But, like, I know that, like, my audience is, like, more like my age versus, like, teenagers, so I don't know how much people would care about that. But it's more of, like, the platform option, you know? And so that's something that I don't know, and I haven't clicked the, like, turn it on button because I don't know, like, I don't want to accidentally turn it on before it's ready. So yeah, there's, like, perks to both. So, like, Patreon, when I do a post, it sends people an email probably, unless they turn that off in the settings. You can get an email, and so then you can go there and directly find things. Whereas with, like, channel memberships, I think that information just goes to someone's feed. So, like, I can share things in a post, and I can share, like, member-specific videos. But I think if I was going to turn on membership, I would give channel members access to the things I give patrons early you know, I would have things, like, similar, like, setup. It's just, I think there's more variety in what I can offer on Patreon. So, yeah, so YouTube gets nothing from Patreon. So that's the reason why they would want to turn it on. But yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to, like, have the other as well or not. It's always, like, as social media landscapes move and shift, you always have to wonder and think about things. So yeah, but I don't mind sharing, like, thoughts and stuff about that. But I'm enjoying this colorway. I'm not sure which I like better. I think I'm very curious to see it dry, to see, like, how this feels. But it's fun. It's fun. I dyed yarn during the video. Sorry, I couldn't help it. But let me see if I can, because you can kind of see the color there. Okay, if I zoom in really big, you can see the colors look pretty true. You can see how the purple does look pretty blue. It is, like, definitely a purple, but I think just next to the pink, it does feel more blue. And so a blue would have felt very blue as well, but this, I just think it works for that background color. And then the greens, like, are all still looking very green. Nope. No. Oh, yes, that did it. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Lacey, that was my thing. So that's why, like, I would not, and especially because I've turned on yearly memberships for Patreon. Patreon is not going anywhere. I'm not considering getting rid of it. I'm just considering adding the YouTube memberships as an alternative. And I would try to make it so that way, like, I wouldn't want people to think that they needed to join both. You know, so that's not my goal, is to do both. It's sort of like you can pick one or the other depending on which platform you might like better, but you don't need both. So that I wouldn't want to do, because I wouldn't want to dilute, like, exclusive content available to, like, patrons or, like, early access content. It's just, yeah, so there wouldn't be new things available for YouTube that weren't available for patrons, except for having your name highlighted in chat. That's something that I can't, there's no other way for me to give that. And so, yeah, I don't know, but it would be fun to commission some custom emotes. That would be enjoyable. Oh man. But yeah, it's always like when you think about, oh, I should plug this in. When you think about social media and stuff, like having like diverse platforms and everything is important. Like I've never streamed on Twitch, and I don't know like if I would ever. Some people do have yarny content on Twitch, but I've never like tried that. That's a whole like other kind of thing that I don't know. But I think that if I was going to do that more, I would want a better streaming setup that is not me sitting on the floor in my kitchen. I would want to have like a chair. Indie dog emotes. I thought about indie emotes. I thought about, let me turn that off. Turn this off, and I'm going to let that go. That was really heavy wind. I felt that. Okay, I'm gonna let this go for 20 more minutes, and I steamed the yellow for a bit. After 20 minutes, we may pop it in the steamer basket. The steamer basket's off for now. No, I thought about indie emotes. I thought about like, you know, happy yarn. I thought about colorful, like a Erlenmeyer flask filled with like a rainbow. I have ideas. So it would be fun. It's just like yeah. But yeah, I've thought about all that. I don't know if you can do like, because there's the like stickers too. Funny. There's a YouTube emote that I'm putting in chat. It's like it's loading. Oh yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I might like work on making those anyway, even if I can't add them to my channel. Because they would make fun stickers at some point or something. The shows that you watch with yarn content are moving back to YouTube. Okay, that's good to know, because I knew some people were doing yarny stuff there, and I was like, should I do that? And like, I wouldn't want to try to do YouTube and Twitch at the exact same time, because that would be challenging to organize, and I don't know if it would be logistically possible for my computer to do that. But if I were ever to do that, then I would, if I were to ever stream on Twitch, which I have no plans to, it's only just like I have my handle, right? If I were ever to do that, then I would like post the videos after the fact on like a second YouTube channel or something, so then it would be available on YouTube as well. But no, the bigger thing is like with all the like reels and with YouTube shorts, like Instagram and Facebook reels and TikTok, I'm like, that might be something I have to try to figure out, and I've been putting that off. Oh, you can do custom membership badges. Is that the membership badge like on YouTube or on Twitch? But that's pretty cool. Yeah. So like the ChemKnits style along will stay on YouTube. I'm not talking about moving. I just always have to like think about the best way to provide content to like as many people, so that way I can continue to buy tons of yarn to make lots of videos. You know, it's got to be synergistic. And I would like someday, I would love to be able to like have a like assistant or producer or someone to help with some of the logistical stuff, so then I can focus more on the creative stuff. But I do not make enough to hire another human. So, you know, that's a consideration. You've seen people do crochet and knitting on Twitch? Yeah. So that's what I don't know. You don't know what Twitch is? Twitch is another, it's a streaming platform. So people don't upload videos that are done, but people will live stream like I'm doing now over there. And most of the content is people playing video games. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the only reason why I would do anything over there was if I was going to start to do something like really, really random. I have only done one video game video ever, and that was last April Fool's Day. I did a dyeing yarn video, but in Minecraft. Using my actual, like, which I haven't played in a while, but I was using my actual Minecraft world. And so I, like, yeah, showed off that. But that was funny because, like, that's not the kind of content I normally make. And surprisingly, it was hard. It was hard to, like, do something that, like, I didn't have a big script, but it was quasi more scripted versus just me playing and or like showing off like the world or something. And so that was more challenging to like try to get the camera angles and like show things, and yeah, that was really funny. But yeah, I think that if I were ever to do Twitch, it would just be a lot of like random stuff versus like the dyeing and stuff I do here. My kids both want to be YouTubers. And so then when we have conversations like, you know, a lot of people like to make video game content, but not everyone can make enough money to like get food and things they need from that. But, you know, with me, they know my job is being a YouTuber. And so therefore, you know, it's cute, but I think that they're just like, oh, I just want to play video games all day. So, yeah, but it, you know, both of them have big personalities on camera, but they don't talk a lot while they're actually playing games. So, but we like video games around here. I would so watch a pixelated animated dialogue. Well, an animated dialogue would be like super, super hard, but the, where is my, I think people didn't necessarily, at first, then they looked at the date. And so that I changed the, I keep getting ads. I changed the title after April Fool's Day, but here. So of course I always make a rainbow sheep farm. So I have like me on face cam, and so you can like turn flowers into dyes in Minecraft. So I'm like, ooh, how to dyeing finished garments with natural dyes instantly. And you just like combine them in your inventory, and then you can change the color of things. So yeah, and in but yeah, that was the really awful faces. So having the face cam on all the time was oh no, not great. But anyway, that was my April Fool's Day video, which, wow, it actually has 6,000 views. Okay, that is hilarious. That is hilarious. So I have one video game video. But yeah, it just made me realize that the people that do like Minecraft tutorials and stuff, like there's a lot of effort to like getting everything ready to go and stuff before you start recording. So, yeah, lots of respect to people who do that. But yeah, if they bring in more dyeing content, that would be cool. You love that one? Because normally, like, I like have all these farms to make all these dyes because you do need the dyes for like other kinds of bricks and stuff. So I have like a lot of dye accessible, and then, but it's just funny how like I always make a rainbow sheep farm, which is doesn't feel like it's ethically sourced in Minecraft, but it's pixels, so I think it's okay. I don't trap sheep and dye them and just continuously shear their wool in real life. So, but anyway. Oh, I set the timer for 20 minutes. I should probably sign off. I should probably sign off because I don't think I'm going to be touching that yarn for a little bit. But as I said, with that speckled yarn, after the 20 minutes, then I might pop it in the steamer basket to steam it, just to make sure that the yellows are well set, because you need the heat as well to set the color. Even though I do have older videos where I would do some like cool vat stuff and I wouldn't necessarily heat set it after. These days I always heat set it because more heat is not going to harm the yarn, and I'd rather make sure things are nice and really well set than have trouble with washing and stuff. There's a girl who dyes yarn based on game characters. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there's a few dyers that do that. Thank you all so much for watching. And again, if you would like to be featured in the recap, so I will share all of the finished yarn that we created in this stream in a recap video that will come out in mid-April. And so if you, usually I try to have that video up around like the 15th of the month or a little bit before. So I would say usually by the 10th or the 11th of the month, if you submitted your photos, then there's a chance that I'll feature it. But I usually will update the post with the picture on Facebook when I've started editing that, finishing editing that video. So then like after that, I'm not going to see the pictures. But you can share your pictures of the yarn you dyed inspired by this photo on Instagram with the hashtag ChemKnits Dialogue, or look for this photo on the ChemKnits Facebook page. It's usually the pinned post, and you can reply with a photo comment with your yarn, and then I'll pull a bunch of pictures and stuff and include it in the recap so we can see how we all have, whether it's very similar or very different takes to the colorway. And so yeah, I really enjoy seeing all these differences and similarities. It's so much fun. And yeah, this whole series, which I guess October will be the 4th year or longer. I've lost count. I don't remember which year the first one was. So it could be 5th year. I don't remember if it was 2018, because I feel like it was not 2019. I feel like it was, so the birthday's in October. October, one of the teens was the first year. But it was like a viewer request thing. And so here we are, still going strong. I'm so glad you all had fun. And subscribe, all the other jazz. Summer mini or spring mini skein mini series is available for pre-order, and there will be a new episode of Dye Pot Weekly tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So I hope that you all have a wonderful beginning to your week, and I'll chat with you all soon.